Walkie Talk, can I get a sound check from you, please?
Yes, can hear you just good.
Lovely, thank you. Mr. Smith, can I get a sound check from you, please?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
So, Madam Clerk, are we ready? And do we have our other assembly members online? Thank you, Madam Clerk. I call the regular assembly meeting for the 4th of March, 2024, to order at 7:01 p.m. Ms. Atkinson, will you lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. Ms. Uscandies, will you please read the land acknowledgement?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to acknowledge that the city and borough of Juneau is on unceded Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous people of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Gunashish.
Thank you, Ms. Uscandies. Madam Clerk, will you please call roll?
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. Ms. Atkinson.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Walkie Talk.
Here.
Ms. Wall.
Present.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Uscandies.
Here.
Mr. Bryson.
Present.
And Acting Mayor Hill.
Here.
We have a quorum present. Madam Mayor Weldon is absent tonight.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We do have a special order of business, and I will change my glasses for that. Are there any members of Mr. Albert Shaw's family in the audience? Seeing no one, I will stand in front and read this anyway, as if they were here. This is a proclamation in memoriam for Albert Shaw. Whereas Albert Shaw was born and raised in Juneau, Alaska, and is related to the Messerschmitt family on his mother's side, and whereas Albert worked for many years as a teacher for the Juneau School District, and whereas he was instrumental in getting the planetarium set up at the Marie Drake Building and operating it for many years. Boy, that echo is terrible. Should I move back? I will. Whereas Mr. Shaw owned and operated the second cabin ski area in Juneau and later was one of the key community members to develop the Eagle Crest ski area. And whereas he was on the National Ski Patrol from 1954 until his death in 2024. And whereas, and in the whereas statements, they say Albert, but I can't say Albert, I have to say Mr. Shaw. Whereas Mr. Shaw skied well into his 90s, and whereas Mr. Shaw served on the Juneau City Council in the 1960s, was a member of the local Carpenters Union for decades, and served on the DIPAC Board of Directors for a long time. And whereas he was a frequent presence at meetings of the City and Borough of Juneau Assembly, testifying on matters of concern to him, including landslide and avalanche safety, Eagle Crest, and other matters, he always knew a lot about them, and he came only just recently to an assembly meeting. He was here frequently and he knew what he was talking about. Whereas Mr. Shaw possessed a wealth of information about Juneau and its history and was generous in sharing his knowledge, especially with the mayor. And whereas Mr. Shaw's longtime friend Bill Corbus remembers many hunting and skiing adventures with Albert, including annual trips to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And whereas Albert Shaw recently passed away a month shy of his 94th birthday at his home in Juneau. And whereas Mr. Shaw leaves behind 2 sons, Robert and Carl, and 3 granddaughters. Now, therefore, I, Michelle Hale, acting mayor of the City and Borough of Juneau, Alaska, on behalf of the City and Borough Assembly, do hereby honor the memory of Juneau resident Albert Shaw for a life well lived in Alaska's capital city. After nearly 94 years of calling Juneau home, there is hardly a section of the community that Mr. Shaw hasn't touched in some way. I will call attention to a quite beautiful painting that I just happen to have in my collection of Mr. Shaw at the back of the room, so you can take a look as you go out. Thank you. We'll move on to minutes. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I move the Assembly approve the June 12th, 2023 regular Assembly meeting minutes, the December 18th, 2023 Joint Assembly Docks and Harbors special meeting minutes, and the February 23rd Special Assembly meeting minutes, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Seeing no objections, those minutes are approved. Madam Manager, do you have any agenda changes?
Yes, I would like to remove item 9 under bid awards. Bid award 24-147 Adair Kennedy Baseball Field Improvements from consideration.
Thank you, Madam Manager. We're at the spot on the agenda for public participation on non-agenda items. I'm just looking on the, I see. So we have people listed for ceasefire on non-agenda items. We also have someone listed for property taxes. So, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I just briefly, could I get an update on the reason for removing that bid award?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't ask. Madam Manager.
Yeah, we are still we have some outstanding questions for the low bidder that we need to clarify before it's awarded, so we'll come back to you at the next meeting.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Madam Clerk, are we ready for public testimony then?
We have others signed up, but not for non-agenda items, so I'll bring the other list when we get to those.
Oh, okay, good. So we have the first person signed up is Sonia Kumar. Please, you have 2 minutes, please. Yep. I'm sorry, press the button, state your name and area of town you live in, and I apologize for the 2 minutes, but we've got a lot of people to testify tonight.
Okay, I'll speak fast. Hi, my name is Sonia Kumar, and I'm speaking to you on behalf of Juno for Palestine. Last month, we shared a ceasefire resolution with the committee, and we hope that all of you have been able to review it. Since then, our team has been reaching out to members of the council to speak with them individually about our goals for the resolution. We're disappointed that our resolution did not make the agenda tonight, but we're hopeful for future meetings. Some of you might be aware that we hosted a ceasefire rally for Palestine a few weeks ago. Our speakers included the esteemed writer Ernestine Hayes, local Tlingit musician Nicole Church, KJ Metcalf with Veterans for Peace, and Louise Brady from the Herring Protectors, among others. We had a Bangladeshi speaker whose own family underwent a genocide and who spoke about their parents' own experiences from that horrific time. Rosita Whirl from Sea Alaska Heritage Institute was even inspired to make an impromptu statement during the rally. We had over 150 people from our community attend and show their support for a permanent ceasefire and an end to U.S. funding of military weapons to the Israel Defense Forces. In addition to our rally, we also met with Representative Mary Peltola a few weeks ago to discuss the ongoing genocide and to gain a better understanding of her position on the matter. During our meeting, we laid out the statistics to her that nearly 30,000 innocent people have been killed in this so-called war, including 12,300 children, that over 8,000 people are still buried under the rubble, and that there are approximately 100,000 amputated or injured Palestinians suffering, including many of whom had to undergo procedures without any anesthetic. That there are countless orphaned children and an unfathomable amount of trauma that survivors, if there are any, will suffer for the rest of their lives. At the end of the meeting, I was surprised to hear Representative Peltola say that she was unaware of many of the facts that we had shared with her, but I got a sense that she was disturbed by the events in Palestine. I hope that our meeting with her will help shape some of her decisions as the sole representative for our state. As a member of our community,
You can wrap up.
Okay. As a member of this community, a community whose own indigenous stewards face a genocide at the hands of colonists, it's been extremely hard to sit back and watch as people are shot while trying to get flour to make bread for their families. This ceasefire resolution means a lot to those of us living on Lingit Ani, and there are people in Anchorage and Fairbanks who are also working with their city councils to pass similar resolutions. Thank you for your time, and I really hope that you consider supporting our resolution to show the world that the Alaska Capitol wants to stand on the humane side of history. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kumar. Are there any questions from members of the Assembly? Seeing no questions, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Harper Gunn. You can correct me on that pronunciation. So please state your name, area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Harper Gunn, and I live in downtown. I am also here today to speak on behalf of Juniper Palestine, and I am also urging the Assembly to put forward and vote on to approve a resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. In the last month since we spoke here, the situation has only become more dire, and every day that this aggression continues, more people are killed, families are destroyed, and more people than we can count are permanently and painfully disabled and injured. And that is not to even mention the starvation that is being actively inflicted on almost 2 million people. We are again asking that this assembly to follow in the footsteps of other cities who have stood up for what is right, and to listen to our own Vice President when she calls for an immediate ceasefire. In all of the events that we have organized, it has been clear that the people of Juneau care deeply about this issue. Even though this assembly does not have the power to stop the ongoing atrocities, you do have the power to show the morals of our community and to show up for what is right. Please consider our resolution, and please do whatever you can to make this stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn. Are there members of the Assembly with questions for our testifier? Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Joseph Greeno. Please state your name, area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
Okay. My name is Joseph Greeno, Akbe. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Greeno. I'm a third-generation Alaskan who has worked in some of Alaska's biggest economic industries, commercial fishing, construction, but most importantly, tourism. Today, I want to share my opinion about the importance of tourism and what it's meant for me. Tourism has played a vital role in the growth and development of our community. It brings numerous benefits to our local economy and the residents who live in Juneau. Tourism is a significant source of employment for Juneau. And with that, the economic resources are abundant. Tourists require a range of services from accommodation, dining, and entertainment. Moreover, tourism stimulates Juneau's economy. More than over 1.5 million tourists visit and spend their time and money on various goods and services which generate revenue for local businesses. Furthermore, speaking from my own experience, tourism has given me an occupation that allows me to support myself. I'm a local operator and manager for a whale watching company in Juneau. I cherish my job because it allows me to do what I love, but I get the reward of giving people some memories that will last a lifetime. Growing up on the water, whether it was going fishing, hunting, or camping adventures, I know how much Juneau and the area has to offer. However, as a local operator, I can see there are things as an industry we need to work on in order to maintain a healthy relationship with our community. I can honestly say I have the faith and trust of our industry to ensure that we will do everything we can to show the public how we are stewards of Juneau. On my final note, I just want to give Juneau's tourism industry my unwavering support because if it wasn't for tourism, I wouldn't be where I am today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greeno. Ms. Euskandis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and thank you for being here and testifying tonight. You said you're a local operator. Are you participating in the ongoing meetings, that working group with tourism best management practices? And if so, how do you think that's going?
Yes, the company I work for is part of TBMP, and our new group, SIWA, Southeast Alaska Whale Watching Association.
Great, thanks.
Are there further questions? Thank you, Mr. Greeno. Next, we have Mel Izard.
And while Mel is coming up, for those of you that are standing in the room, we have some seats here. We do have limited capacity in this room for fire marshal reasons, and we do have overflow capacity upstairs in the conference room. So if you are standing, especially blocking entranceway area, I would ask that you either find a seat or go upstairs to our overflow space if possible.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate that. We have, Mel Izard, you can correct my pronunciation. You have, please state your name, area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Mel Izard, and I'm a resident of Juneau, residing in the Valley area. I'm testifying today to ask for your support in calling for a ceasefire in Palestine. As a local assembly, you might be wondering why it's important to speak up regarding an international matter. First of all, I want to bring the Assembly's attention to the fact that the population of Juneau is just around 30,000 people, and the official death toll in Gaza is now over 30,000 people. Can you imagine if every single person in Juneau was killed? Those 30,000 Palestinians were just like us, people with hopes and dreams and families. I hope this matters to you because I hope that human life matters to you as much as it does to me and as much as it does to your constituents. Secondly, I believe that the Juneau Assembly has a powerful voice, and calling for a ceasefire would put us on the right side of history and show our state and federal legislators that Juneauites will not stand for the baseless murder of civilians. The murder of civilians is being paid for by our tax dollars. Everyone in America right now, everyone in this room is complicit in killing civilians. Our voices matter, and I urge you to use your voice to call for peace, to call for a ceasefire. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Izard. Are there any questions from members of the assembly? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Andes Javier Camila. Please state your name, area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
That just works. Yeah, my name is Andres Javier Camacho. I live in the Valley. Here to speak in favor of our city passing resolution that calls for a ceasefire in Palestine. Yeah, it's hard to imagine. I don't know if there's ever been a time where so many people have witnessed, the industrial murder of so many people. Of course, there have been countless atrocities that have happened both on this land and others, but it's pretty staggering just to think about the fact that we can all witness this every day. And yeah, so as Mel was saying, what's Juneau's role in this? Of course, our taxpayer dollars go to fund this this so-called war, the killing of children, and of course, there's a lot of things here happening at home. But this is something that we can do. I don't think it's just necessarily about being able to, in retrospect, say we stood on the right side of history, but it's in the present day to enact our values, to say that we value human life, that we care about children. And that's really not a controversial topic. Do we care about anybody's child? And so it's a powerful statement. We're a state capital, and we're saying that this is not okay, and this has to stop. We really don't have to get into anything beyond that. I think what we saw in the news recently, that the United States has started doing airdrops of food, and they delivered 38,000 meals to over 1 million hungry people, which is really just that more than anything seems like some sort of meaningless display of saying that we're doing something, but it really doesn't address any of the problems. This would be more significant than that, than just our military flying over and dropping 30,000 meals to people that are starving. So I just want to call on all of us to, in this current moment, to really think about what our values are, children, innocent lives, and to call for a ceasefire immediately.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the assembly? Seeing no questions, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Joanne Wallace. Joanne Wallace will not be testifying. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony. I appreciate it very much. Next, we have the consent agenda. Are there any requests from members of the public for consent agenda changes? Are there any assembly requests for consent agenda changes? Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor Hale. I move that we adopt the consent agenda as written and ask for unanimous consent.
Seeing no objection, the consent agenda is approved. We are going to move into the public hearing section of the meeting, and before we do that, I would like to, because our first ordinances, there are 3 ordinances about financing of the Juneau School District. Before I'll kind of lay out some ground rules and thoughts about how that testimony will go. But before we have the public testimony, I would like to request that Superintendent Hauser provide us with a quick update. I believe you prepared some slides for us. Is this a good time for you, Superintendent Hauser, to provide us with an update on sort of where the school district is right now? And if you could, in your comments, touch on timeline for us. Thank you.
And Madam Acting Mayor, his presentation, I will be sharing it on the screen. There are some copies at the back of the room as well.
Thank you.
And it is posted on the online agenda under supplemental materials at the very bottom of the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Superintendent Hauser.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Hale. So appreciate that. I do have some few slides, but for the record, my name is Frank Hauser. I'm the superintendent of the Juneau School District. And I was actually asked to share a little bit of information tonight about the FY25 budget. Now that the final district reorganization plan has been adopted by the Board of Education, the FY25 budget process can be completed. So as we were in the process of building the FY25 budget, we needed to work from an enrollment projection. We have finally received the final enrollment projection numbers from our demographer. He is projecting a total decline in enrollment of 3.4%, and that equals about 140 students. You will see we are basing the FY25 forecast for the budget on a forecasted enrollment of 3,942 students. You can see the mid forecasts for the next 10 years and the enrollment numbers that are projected for the 10 years. From the enrollment projection, the district can estimate revenues. As we know, a bipartisan education bill has passed the House and Senate, and it contains a $600 increase to the base student allocation. However, Governor Dunleavy has signaled he will veto the bill. We have here two columns, one with no increase to the base student allocation on the left. That projects an FY25 foundation revenue of just over $68 million for the Juneau School District. On the right, we have a $680 increase to the base student allocation, which projects an FY25 foundation revenue of approximately $73 million. With the final adopted school consolidation in JSC and the legislature's approval of a $680 BSA increase, the district for FY25 would have a deficit of $485,000, and that is with meeting the fund balance targeted specified in board policy. And that is, of course, the column on the right with the $680 BSA increase. With attrition, it seems likely there would be few to no reductions in force with that BSA increase of $680. Without the BSA increase, the column in the middle, you see that the district still has a deficit of approximately $4.8 million. It's down from approximately $10 million following the adoption of a building consolidation, but is still significant. If the governor vetoes the legislature's BSA increase and the district has to do subsequent reductions in force, as JEA President Heidemann said last week, teachers will be able to trace a direct line from their pink slip to the governor's office and his veto action. Instead of addressing a reorganized statewide teacher shortage, the governor will be directly responsible for teacher layoffs in Alaska's capital city. The community and the Board of Education have made the tough decisions and done our part. No one can say that the Juneau School District and the board have not done their part to balance the budget. CBJ and the Assembly are doing all that they can. The legislature has done its part. The next part will be solely on the governor. We hope that he proves us wrong here, but we have to move forward with the data we have. The district has no choice now but to build the budget on a BSA of $5,960 since the governor has signaled that he will veto the BSA increase. As discussed in the special Board of Education meeting last week, that will mean increases to the pupil-teacher ratio and a reduction in force. But the board has acted to minimize reductions in force by adopting the reorganization plan, which dropped the projected deficit for FY25 from approximately $10 million to $4.8 million. One of the questions that I think Deputy Mayor Hill asked was a little bit of a timeline. And so, as I said, the board adopted a reorganization plan. The administration's in the process of developing a balanced budget based off of a BSA increase of $5,960. One of the assumptions in that budget is one of the ordinances that's under consideration tonight of the $1.65 million for non-instructional shared services. And that is built into the budget that we are working on. On Thursday, the board will have the first reading of that budget, and we'll be able to look at that. The goal is to have that available before the board meeting. We're still in the process of finding that $4.8 million and trying to find the best way to do that while still providing opportunities for kids and providing the high quality of education that the community of Juneau and, quite honestly, the students deserve. And so we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're providing those opportunities and providing that options for our students while minimizing the impact on our staff that provide that direct instruction and support to our students. So the first reading for that, for the budget will be on Thursday. And then the second reading on that budget will be the Tuesday after. So that first reading is this Thursday, which is the 7th, and on the 12th, Tuesday, in about a week and a half, will be the second reading on that budget, at which point the hope is that it is adopted by the board at that time. Of course, the board will go through and make any adjustments that they deem that they would like to make, but that would be the goal, is by the 12th of March that we'll have a balanced budget to submit to the Assembly.
Thank you, Superintendent Hauser. Are there any questions for Superintendent Hauser? Ms. Wall?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I think you said this, but just to be clear, these numbers, so, when we're looking at the deficit without a BSA increase, that does include the 3 ordinances passing tonight. Would that number, if the FY25 shared services ordinance did not pass tonight, that number the deficit number would increase. Is that correct?
Superintendent Hauser.
Yeah, through the chair to Member Wool, that is correct. That $4.8 million does reflect that revenue assumption that the ordinance does pass, and is $1.65 million.
Thank you. Mr. Smith? And for those in room 224, there are seats that have freed up in main chambers. So if there is anyone in 224, there are seats. Superintendent Hauser. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Smith, sorry, got off track.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hale. Thank you, Mr. Hauser, for being here tonight. I guess I just wanted to chat. I have been, as the liaison to the school board, I've been listening to most of your meetings you've had. I can't say all because you've had a lot. And I know they have gone long and have been very difficult as you and the school board are working through this, the deficit, which you have to fill for FY25. We've gotten a bit of email and things about the 7 to 12 model at both JD and TM. And I just, maybe for the public and maybe for members of the Assembly, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just talk a little bit about some of the discussion by the board on that model, and then also, in terms of maybe cost or deficit reduction, I guess, if you wouldn't mind talking about that. Thank you.
Superintendent Hauser, is that something that you can speak to?
Yeah, thank you, Member Hale, or through the chair to Member Smith. Well, I guess to start answering the question, earlier on through this process, when the board was looking at reorganization and consolidation models, there were a number of concepts that were put out there for consideration and for feedback on. I think you said it. Yes, there's been a number. There was, I think, about 2.5 weeks where every single day except for maybe a Sunday, I was out, speaking or talking about or providing input on and getting feedback from community members, staff members, parents, students. And it has been something that we've really felt strongly about, is to get out there and get the feedback and get the information to the community. And so the model that you referred to, the 712 model, as well as a number of other different models, were on the concept grade level sheets. They were, that as well as the other models were available and did receive feedback. The board received over 1,500 pieces of feedback, as well as emails and other kind of handwritten comments through some of our face-to-face public input sessions. And so there was feedback that was provided on some of those models, or all the models, including the 712 model. As far as costings and budgeting out, there were a number of models that were budgeted out through requests that came from the board. And ultimately, about a week and a half ago, the board made the decision to adopt the model, what was termed at the time S1B, which was the 7th, 8th grade at Thunder Mountain, 6th grade at the elementary schools. So the elementary schools became K6 and 9, 12 at JD.
Thank you, Superintendent Hauser. Mr. Smith, do you have follow-up?
No, I do apologize. Maybe, the superintendent isn't the right person to put on it. It just, I know we have been getting a lot of comments about it. Obviously, a incredibly difficult position the board is in. Anyway, we know the impacts to students and staff are going to be significant, but there is that $10 million deficit that just has to be addressed. Anyway, I thank you for that. I did just want to bring it up. We did have some comments, so I thought I'd air it out. But I mean, thank you for that comment, Superintendent Hauser.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Wahalgadak.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, Mr. Hauser, if you could give us just a little bit of, and I don't need you to go over the hundreds of hours of no doubt conversations and testimony you've had on this, but what the conversation has looked like to minimize the impact to our students. I know that there's a lot here that you've presented to us about the numbers and the funding, but I'm just curious about the conversation that's been had about minimizing the impact.
Thank you, Wahalgadak. Superintendent Hauser.
Yeah, through the chair to Member Wahalgadak. Thank you for that question. And the reason why I think is because I think at the end of the day, it's always important for me to remind people, I work for the students. I know the board thinks that I work for them, and I do technically, but I really do work for the students. And the thing through this whole process, and it has been about student opportunities and making sure that we still, with facing a significant deficit, how do we continue to provide the opportunities for students? And through this transition, making sure that the well-being of our students is top on my priority, and it's been something that I've written about, and making sure that it's something that we want to support. One of the things that I've already done, I've met with the student government councils for both schools. I plan on, meeting with them again. I've had conversations, and I've read all the testimony, read all the feedback, I should say, listened to the testimony, and have had a chance to talk with. Matter of fact, was just coming over from a site council meeting at Thunder Mountain tonight, where I had a chance to hear from families about, making sure that the transition is smooth. The transition is something that we are absolutely focused on. I've had conversation with our Academic Outcome and Reorganization Committee, which started in November and started being formed in November to talk about, and one of the focuses we are going to look at is the transition. We're having conversations about bringing our student governments together and talking about the transition. The building administrators have already been talking about and working together, and have already sent out a joint communication to families about, scheduling classes, athletics, trying to get as much information that we know right now to focus on alleviating some stress that I know families and students might have. And so that transition is something that's very important. It is something that we are going to continue to focus on. Obviously, we still have to focus on getting the budget presented and put together and presented to the board, and the board to adopt the budget. But for me, the big focus is working on that transition and making sure that it is a supportive consolidation, bringing the two communities together and creating a new community, a unified community that is JSD, and really moving forward into the next phase.
Thank you, Superintendent Wahalgadak. Do you have follow-up? No follow-up. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. We've known from the beginning that there's some complexities around the timing of all this. I understand why the school district would be putting forward a budget not assuming a BSA increase. But I'm curious about if the school district puts together a budget, not knowing if the BSA is going to increase, not knowing if the assembly is going to make a funding decision during our normal budget cycle to increase funding to the school district. Can the actions that you all will need to do to fill a deficit of this size be undone? If you have to make decisions to
reduce staffing, and then additional funding comes in later down the line. How does that impact the transitions that you're planning for?
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Superintendent Hauser.
Yeah, through the chair to Member Wall. You know, unfortunately, districts have gotten used to getting money back kind of late in the game over the last few years. It's been a number of governors ago since we had any kind of a forward funding to where you could project and have stable and predictable funding in the coming years. And so the superintendents and administrators and boards have gotten used to the realities that additional money might be coming after a budget is passed. And I think that's been, for most districts, kind of a standard practice for them. We do have a significant deficit that we're facing that we're having to address. We are in the process of putting together and the board adopting a reduction in force, a RIF plan, to address the severity of what some of these reductions might look like, which is laid out in statute. And those are pieces that we have in place. But one of the things that a reduction in force plan puts in place for the district is a structure to be able to thoughtfully bring back staff based on, you know, that plan that has been adopted. And so if, and I am crossing my fingers, doing everything I can to, you know, hope that, you know, that BSA increase comes through. But as that BSA increase, once we become we're more clear on if there is going to be additional money coming to the districts and really to the Juneau School District, but we know with certainty that that funding is there, then we can start bringing back staff to support our students, making sure that we're expanding those programs, making sure that those opportunities are still there for our students. And so this unfortunately has been a practice that districts have gotten good at, which is sad.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any further questions for Superintendent Hauser? Seeing no questions, thank you very much. Really, really appreciate your being here.
Thank you, and thank you to the Assembly.
So now I'm going to thank everyone for coming to testify on the 3 budget items related to the Juneau School District. And I've got a few comments to make before we start the testimony. We have 3 ordinances. One is a loan and 2 are grants, one for the current fiscal year FY24, one for the next fiscal year FY25. The way we're going to do the public testimony is people can testify on any one or all 3 of the ordinance, because I'm expecting some of the testimony to kind of spread across the ordinances. So I will start with those on Zoom to testify, and we have 5 people on Zoom, and I'll address those in a minute. And then I will move to the people listed on our sign-up sheets. And what I'll do is I'll list the names of those signed up in order, and I'll call up 3 or 4 people at a time so that we've got a line, and that way, as one person finishes their testimony, somebody else will be able to step right into the chair. So we'll just follow that process. Each person will be allowed 2 minutes to testify. Madam Clerk, are we certain that there's nobody up in room 224? Do we have a mechanism for checking that? Because I do see that we have chairs here.
I believe at the last time we saw the room being projected, there were no extra persons other than staff, but we will check with the staff.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So after we close the public testimony, and we've got quite a list of testifiers, thank you for being here, we'll move on to the ordinances. The clerk will read the title of the first ordinance up for consideration, and the manager will describe that ordinance, and then the assembly action will occur on that ordinance. In accordance with the assembly rules of procedure, meetings will be conducted with decorum, and members of the audience are asked to refrain from clapping or other signs of support or opposition. I notice that we have signs. It's fine to hold up signs, but they cannot block the view of those behind you. So you might think about where you are if you're going to hold up those signs. We have a maximum number of 500 seats available by Zoom to watch tonight's assembly meeting, but we are also broadcasting this via YouTube live stream on CBJ's YouTube channel at City and Borough of Juneau 2053. I want to thank everyone for being here. I know how hard this is. I know I don't have children in school right now, so I don't know it from that perspective. I just know how very difficult this is for members of our community, for our schools, our teachers, and for all of you who are here. So I just really appreciate your being here. Thank you so much. So we will start with the Zoom testifiers. Madam Clerk, did you have some point to make?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. And although we max out at 500, we're nowhere close to that. We haven't even topped out at 100. So had we gotten that far, I would have recommended people, once they were done testifying, to move over to the YouTube live stream. If you're Zooming and testifying, you can still stay on the Zoom without having to move over to allow for others. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And we do have 5 people who signed up before 4 p.m. today to testify by Zoom. We do not take additional people testifying by Zoom in the meeting. So if you want to testify, you'd have to be in chambers. So, Madam Clerk, I'm going to go ahead and follow the procedure that we came up with. Please let us know the first person to testify and the next 2 people in the queue, and we'll bring that person over.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. The first person on our list is Sharon Augustine, followed by Mark Johnson, and followed by Karen McCoy. So for those names mentioned, if you will raise your virtual hand, we will put you to the top of the list so we can identify you and allow you to speak at this time. And we have 2 minutes.
So Ms. Augustine, please state your name and area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
My name's Sharon Augustine. I'm the parent of a sophomore and a junior. We live in the Valley. Today you'll hear about how the decision to choose the selected school consolidation model was made at the end of a grueling 7-hour-long meeting, was voted against by the board. Then after a private and clearly illegal transpiration between several board members at a recess, evidenced by your own recording, was then put to vote again, this time in favour, at 12:30 in the morning. Today you'll hear about how one of these models, that of keeping the 7th through 12th grade at dual schools, was initially presented in the first board meeting, but then was completely dropped for consideration with no explanation, no facts or figures were ever presented, no reasoning or justification has ever been given. And the school board is continually choosing to simply turn a deaf ear to the pleas of hundreds of parents in our community, asking them to please just review this popular model. Today, you'll hear about how the 7 to 12 model is used successfully in schools in the lower 48. In fact, in Australia, the whole country uses the 7 through 12 model. It's standard there. And they've been successful because wings and hallways and classrooms and bell schedules can be arranged so middle school grades never have to interact with high school grades. And yet resources and teachers and staff and buildings can all be utilised much more efficiently in a consolidated situation. Today, what you might hear is how this is going to shrink our town even more. Together with capital creep and the transfer of jobs up north and the closure of jobs here, this situation is doing nothing to keep families here and nothing to boost enrolment rates. I've lived in Juneau almost 20 years. My sons are 6th generation Southeast Alaskans, and yet even we too are now considering how opportune our children's education chances are going to be here. Today, you might hear from
Ms.
Yes.
Please wrap it up. You're at your 2 minutes. So
yes,
just
okay, no problem.
Moment to wrap it up.
Sure. What we didn't hear today was the school board and Superintendent Hauser admit that they're being just a little bit dishonest in their deliberations with you tonight. I've attended every school board meeting and I've never seen anything in support of the 7 through 12 model. There's no information on the school board website about it, and that is indicative of the situation here. You won't hear them admit that they didn't vet all their models, and yet they're quite happy to force them on the public.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I hope that you will demand that the board be transparent and don't hand over millions of dollars of our rates levies before they rip up our school system with impunity until they've had a chance to vet all the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Augustine. And I will ask members of the Assembly that if you do have questions, that you keep them very brief and to the point. We have a lot of people testifying tonight. Does anyone have questions for Ms. Augustine? Seeing no questions, thank you for your testimony. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Next up, we have Mark Johnson, followed by Karen McCoy. If Karen is in the Zoom, please raise your virtual hand. And after Karen McCoy, we have Rebecca Braun.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, you have 2 minutes. Please state your name and area of town you live in.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And members of the Assembly, my name is Mark Johnson. My wife and I live at Bayview, North Douglas. We currently have a guardianship of 2 elementary school age grandchildren who take the bus to Saint Gastineau in South Douglas. And I have a guest editorial in the Juneau Empire on the subject that I'm speaking to you about, which is busing. Excuse me. And I think that the reorganization plan is going to create transportation complications that haven't been carefully thought through. And because the Assembly is supporting the school district, which I think is great, I support that. I think you have the right to ask for a careful plan on how many aspects of the plan are being addressed, including the busing of kids to and from school. And my concern is that if you could use the analogy of a school just taking maybe 25 or 30 kids and putting them in a cramped room without any real supervision and leaving them, that would never happen. But that more or less is what happens on the school buses. And our kids spend at least a half an hour each way every day. And our
Mr. Johnson, you've broken up. Mr. Johnson, we cannot hear you.
Madam Deputy Mayor, we do have everything unmuted on our side. So Mr. Johnson, if you've accidentally muted yourself, we are not hearing any of your testimony at this time.
some of which are going to be really long. And
Mr. Johnson.
Yes, and okay, I'll finish. And the other issue I have.
No, Mr. Johnson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, your testimony, you had a big gap where we didn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think you left off with the kids spending 30 minutes on the bus. Can we restart the timer in some way? Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I was just saying that our granddaughter, who had a concussion, sometimes complains about headaches because of the noise on the bus. And our grandson had a situation a couple of weeks ago where he had an altercation and was hit over the head with a bottle. And our granddaughter witnessed it, neighbors witnessed it. One of the neighbor mothers called us, first of all, to compliment him for how he handled it. But my question is, I mean, there potentially could be liability if a kid gets seriously hurt on a bus. And so I'm saying, if we're going to put kids on buses for really long periods of time, which is what this plan is going to do, then I think we need bus monitors. I know there's a cost to it, but I think it should be part of the plan. I think it's one of the things that the city should ask from the school district as part of the overall plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Are there any questions? Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I am not seeing Corinne or Karen, I'm not sure how they pronounce their name, McCoy on Zoom. The next person is sign up is Rebecca Braun. If Rebecca could raise their virtual hand, we will be able to unmute you. And after Rebecca, we will have Amy Lloyd.
Thank you, Ms. Braun. You have, please state your name and area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
Hi, this is Rebecca Braun, and I live downtown, and I'm a parent of a student at JDHS, Yadaat Kasei. Thank you very much for your consideration of these ordinances, and I want to testify in support of all three. I really appreciate this community and our consistent support for education. It's a huge factor in my living here, and I know that some people are very upset, and I don't want to discount their feelings about the school board decisions that have been made. But I'm concerned that rejecting these ordinances won't undo or lessen any negative impacts, but rather will probably exacerbate and require even more difficult decisions. And just briefly to the question asked of Superintendent Hauser, how are you going to support students? I just came from our site council meeting where we spent an hour and a half thinking about that. And I just wanted to share that our community at JDHS has a lot of compassion, and we are really committed to doing everything we can as families, students, and staff to promote healing and a successful transition. So I just, again, want to express my support and appreciation for the Assembly for these ordinances.
Thank you, Ms. Braun. Are there questions from the Assembly? No questions. Thank you so much for your testimony. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. We have Amy Lloyd signed up next, and that's the end of our Zoom testifiers.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ms. Lloyd, please state your name and area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Amy Lloyd, and I live in the Twin Lakes area. I'm a teacher in the Juneau School District and the parent of 2 children who came through the district and graduated in 2020 and 2022. Assembly members, thank you for supporting young people, which is one of the best ways to foster a strong, vibrant economy, encourage young people to move here, and to make this an excellent place to live. My plea is that you move past the emotional feedback from this small group trying to halt the progress made by the board and focus on something positive. Funding education and saving our district does pay off, and I have solid data to prove it. I have compiled a report from 16 graduates from the Juneau School District. These members of the class of 2022 are now 19 and 20 years old, and I've chosen to highlight those who may well come back to this community and raise their families here. One is in flight school, hoping to fly for Alaska seaplanes in the future. 2 are sophomores at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and University of Montana, both majoring in Indigenous studies. 2 are sophomores at UAF studying engineering and fisheries. We have a heavy equipment operator now learning large crane operations, a sophomore at Stanford majoring in earth systems, a young woman serving this country in the Coast Guard Reserves, a young man working as a Juneau sheet metal worker. One is at Cal Poly Humboldt studying fisheries with the intent to return to Southeast Alaska and work in mariculture research. One is in the nursing program at Linfield and another in dental school. My own daughter, a 22 graduate, is a sophomore at the Colorado School of Mines in geological engineering and planning on interning at Greens Creek this summer. There are more, but you get the gist. Without a quality education, without your financial support, would these Juneau School District graduates be in a position to add to our community, our economy, and the strength of our city? The best way to get a quality education is with the adopted plan of SB 1. Please approve all 3 of these ordinances and continue to fund education. We are thankful for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Lloyd. Are there any questions of Ms. Lloyd? Ms. Lloyd, thank you for your testimony. Madam Clerk, we will now go to the list for in-person testimony. Can you coach me a little bit on what I'll do here? So I'll just read the first 3.
So, first up to speak is this gentleman. Next to
I'm just gonna ask them. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'm going to state three names and ask you to stand up in order. And then we'll have the first person speak and have the second and third so that we can move through our list. Not trying to rush anybody, but we have a lot of people. Daniel Coleman, Noah Coleman, and Shannon Green. And Daniel Coleman, you can take a seat there, and Noah Coleman and Shannon Green just stand behind. Mr. Coleman, will you please state your name and area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Assembly. Hi, my name is Daniel Coleman. I'm a resident in the Mendenhall Valley. I'm a class of 95 GDHS graduate and a parent of one child in the school district and another who's homeschooling outside of the school district. I left Juneau as a young adult and returned 10 years ago to raise my family here. I believe the school board made a rushed decision that will harm all of our schools and community without fully considering well-researched options. I hope that before you offer this loan and take over non-instructional costs, that you will question why the school board did not consider the model with grades 7 through 12 in both high schools. I'm sure you're aware of the draft facility master plan that CBJ paid $300,000 for in 2017. It predicted much of what we're dealing with today and offered several recommendations. Did you know that the first recommendation option to deal with the high school buildings was to combine pre-K through 6 and then put 7 through 12 in each of the high school buildings? Of the recent models the school administration chose to offer the community to consider, they never proposed or supported that model. Since the school board's decision, I've written several times and had no responses from any of the members who have voted to approve the current plan. I waited to testify on this matter before you. I hoped that the school board would respond to my and other community members' requests for them to reconsider the grades 7 through 12 model, but they never responded or allowed public testimony at their recent budget meeting. Do I think it's the best model? I don't know, and that's the point. The consultants we paid for recommended that model, and the school district did not fully consider it. It's late, but it's not too late. If we want to encourage families to come and stay in Juneau, it's time to hold the school board and the administration accountable. Please reconsider your support for the loan and non-instructional funding until you're confident that the district is making the best educated decision. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Are there questions for Mr. Coleman? Seeing no questions, Noah Coleman. Please state your name, area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Noah Coleman, and I live in the Valley. I'm testifying to voice my opinion on the ongoing school district budget crisis. I believe that it would not be beneficial to move 10 through 12th graders to JD. I will present 3 main contentions to support my argument. The first is transportation. If all of the high schoolers consolidate to JD, not only will parking be a nightmare, even worse than it already is, but you'll have a significantly larger number of inexperienced drivers on Egan in the winter. This will almost certainly lead to more car accidents and in general be detrimental to the student body. My second contention is scheduling issues. Not only will a large amount of the student population have to make the drive every morning, but due to this, 0-hour classes will probably have to be pushed back or canceled entirely. I'm currently taking jazz band at Thunder Mountain, and this would be impossible to make due to the drive and traffic. Not only this, but with the teacher layoffs, there will probably be a large amount of clubs cut. For example, I'm currently in DDF, and if no one is there to run that, that'll be a major part of my school life cut out. My third contention is the community. There's already been a large amount of pushback due to the decision to merge to JD, and the schools have had kind of a rivalry since Thunder Mountain opened. Being a high school student myself, a lot of teenagers aren't ones to forgive and forget. I suspect that this decision will lead to conflict and possibly even fights. Finally, to recap, in my opinion, the schools should not be consolidated because of transportation, scheduling issues, and community pushback. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Are there questions for Mr. Coleman? Thank you for your testimony.
Madam
Shannon,
Deputy Mayor, could we have a
Mr.
brief at
President.
ease?
We will take maybe 5 minutes.
I only need 2.
We'll take a 5-minute break. It's been a while. I apologize, and Ms. Green, I apologize for you standing. We'll take a 5-minute break. We will reconvene at 8:07.
Can I have everyone's attention just for a moment? If you have not yet signed up to testify, but you wanted to, this is your last chance to do so before we finish the sign-up list. So come see me if you still want to testify and have not yet signed up. Thank you.
I bring the meeting back to order at 8:09. That was a couple more minutes. Ms. Green, and maybe we could ask John Laurie, Cindy Brown Mills, and Reagan Adams to line up behind Ms. Green. Ms. Green, your name and area of town you live in, and 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Assembly members. My name is Shannon Green. I'm a Valley resident and a parent to 3 boys that have absolutely thrived in the Juneau School District starting in Ock Bay in 2014. Mayor Weldon hit the nail on the head February 2nd, stating to the Juneau School Board, quoted in the paper, "You broke the public trust." Public trust to not only provide optimal education opportunities and outcomes, but also proper fiscal stewardship of millions of our tax dollars invested in our children's education and building their future. We all support investing our tax dollars to fund a robust, enriching, and importantly, solvent public education system for our children. There is no question that CBJ has demonstrated that same investment in our kids' education. I am here today because I have a profound concern about giving more money without guardrails to a school board who not only sorely mismanaged our investment, despite a 2017 study that warned of declining populations and proposed needed consolidation. Public trust. The citizens are over a barrel because our kids are at stake. I want the school district to be solvent, intact, and ready to teach our students in the fall. However, this community has been calling for accountability. And as a taxpayer, and I speak for many others who are not here today, I expect this total $9.65 million municipal bailout to come with conditions. I'll start tonight by calling for the resignation of those key school board members with direct financial responsibility who have demonstrated a continuous fiscal lack of stewardship of the public tax dollars meant for students. This was occurring well before the school year began. Had I done this in the military, I would have been relieved of command.
Ms. Green, I'll wrap up. Oh, thank you.
In exchange for this bailout, President Sorensen, Vice President Mackey, and the Finance Committee Chair Muldoon should resign for this multi-million-dollar error in judgment and oversight. This consolidation decision will have lasting effects well beyond my 3 sons' educational experience in Juneau. Let's start rebuilding that breach of public trust with a responsible school board who can lead Juneau with new possibilities and protect this community
Ms.
from
Green.
any more damage. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Green? Excuse me. Please, no applause, no comments. I appreciate that.
I'm sorry, I didn't wait for questions.
I believe there are no questions. Ms. Green, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor.
John Lowry, please state your name and area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
I'm John Laurie and I live in the Valley. I'd like to express my strong support for keeping both high schools open with grades 7 to 12. My reasons are as follows. First, small schools have been found to outperform large schools in important metrics. Academic test scores and graduation rates are higher at small schools. Student participation in activities is higher and the dropout rate is lower at small schools. A Google search on "Are large schools better than small schools?" will yield results of numerous studies that support these facts. In addition, the historical evidence in Juneau supports that. Juneau's graduation rate increased dramatically when we went to 2 schools. The graduation rate for Native students went from less than 50% to nearly 80%. The participation rate in student activities increased from 44% to 70%. My second reason, the school board reported negligible cost differences between the 7 to 12 two-school model and the 9 to 12 JDS proposal that they adopted at the February 22nd school board meeting. But in a letter dated February 26th, 4 former school board members reported that there could be a loss in state funding of up to $2.6 million starting 2 years from now if the one school proposal is adopted. So I don't know if that was factored into that negligible difference. I think that 2.6 million needs to be fact-checked to see if there would be that loss. And I've heard several reasons why the 7 to 12, against the 7 to 12 model that I'd like to address. First, they said it's not desirable to mix 7th graders with 12th graders at the same school, but you can put them in a separate wing, separate bell schedule, separate start. So I don't think that could be an issue.
Please wrap up briefly.
So I'm not opposed to the loan, but I think the Assembly should verify the 2.6 million potential reduction from the state, and they should also question the school board members on the reasons for rejecting the neighborhood schools with grades 7 to 12.
Thank you, Mr. Lowry. Are there questions from the Assembly? Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Cindy Brown Mills. Ms. Mills, please state your name and area of town, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Cindy Brown Mills, and I live in the Valley. Last week, I attended JEDC's Innovation Summit with several of you, during which we talked extensively about scenario planning. As I was preparing my testimony for this evening, I couldn't help but reflect on those conversations and the importance of taking the time to fully understand the impact the decisions made today have on our future. How does the Board of Education's decision impact the issue facing our community? Juneau is facing a future where our population declines, and most of our citizens are of retirement age. In that future, it is vital that we attract working-age adults who will move to Juneau. Having an excellent school system is very closely tied to this. Without one, we are unlikely to have the other. So think about that for a moment. The vitality of our school system is closely tied to our ability to attract and retain working adults to support our economy. That's huge. You have the power of the purse. This is why I implore you to make the courageous choice to postpone or put conditions on a decision on the school district funding requests. It's crucial that we take the time to fully understand and evaluate the potential consequences before moving forward. Require the district to take the time to provide a comprehensive review of the options before them and before us as a community. Don't rush into something without fully considering the future outcomes that will result from the decisions made today. Our children and our community deserve nothing less than your utmost attention and consideration. Please prioritize them and make choices that will benefit their future. Thank you.
Well, that was good timing. Thank you, Ms. Brown Mills. Are there members of the Assembly with questions? I see no questions. Thank you very much for your testimony. Reagan Adams.
Hello, my name is Reagan Adams. I live in the Valley, and I am a student at Thunder Mountain High School. I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate the funding to help with the budget deficit, but I was also hoping the Assembly could help the school board listen to the people. During 6 hours of testimony during the school board meeting, many students and parents stated that they were opposed to the conjoining of the high schools, yet it still passed. I feel like all options weren't fairly looked at, and I was hoping you could help them look at all viable options, including the 7 to 12 model. I feel like the 7 to 12 model would be the most effective. School is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and having a choice would help benefit everyone's needs, which juxtaposes the consolidation plan. I really appreciate the funding, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Are there questions? Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Adams. And I'm wondering if this is Jennifer Adams? Ms. Adams. Please state your name and area of town you live in. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Adams. I'm a Valley resident.
I'd like to thank you for your time today and appreciate your efforts in offering the funding to our school district. It's very important. And we do fully support the funding to the school district. However, I agree with everybody else. There should be some consideration, some protections for your financial investment to make sure it's spent wisely. Our generation of children, they were raised with choices. They were taught from an early age. We encourage them to use their voices, to speak up when something isn't right, and their opinions and feelings do matter. These students do their research and they make educated choices. My daughter chose to attend TMHS. This was not a choice she made lightly. She attended all the open houses, talked to the teachers, talked to her friends who are already in high school, researched the coaches for the sport she wanted to participate and the clubs that were available to her. She chose TMHS and she's thriving there. Our generation, which is now leaders in our workplaces and community, has spent a lot of time and money evolving our workplaces to meet the needs of the current generation of employees. We did this so we can recruit and maintain an effective workforce. Why wouldn't we do that for our students? Why can't we provide them with an environment where they can learn and thrive instead of cramming them into one school model? Because it used to be that way, and it's a model that our generation is comfortable with. The people are speaking out. We want something different. We don't want 1,000 kids in one school. The small schools do matter and they do make a difference for our children's education. There were nearly 1,000 Juneau residents signed a petition over the weekend to have the 7 through 12 model explored because it has yet to be explored. Numbers have not been applied to it and none of that information has been made public at any of the school board meetings. And I understand that the Assembly is not in a position to overthrow the school board's decision, but you do have some influence with the financial assistance you're voting on to provide. Please provide the funding, but please help guide them into exploring all viable options for our students and help guide them to meeting the requirements for the March 15th deadline, but share with them where they have the flexibility to find the best option for our students.
Thank you for your testimony. I see no questions from Assembly members. Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Bonnie Webster, Tanya Harelski, and Melissa Colum. Ms. Webster, please state your name and area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Webster and I live out the road. I have 3 kids in the Juneau School District. One is elementary at Ock Bay, one is at DZ, and one is at TM. I just wanted to mention that there's a post on Facebook and that one of the teachers, I think, made tonight about those of us who are in support of the 7 to 12 model thinking that we're asking for this loan to be denied, and that's not the case. We're not asking for the loan to be denied. We're just asking for stipulations to be put on it, for some accountability for the Juneau School Board. So we're asking, don't give out the loan without some stipulations. Ask the board to reconsider, to review all the options, and maybe even review that 2017 study. I read an article on one of the news sites, and I can't pull it up now because I can't find it anymore, but where one of the school board members had said that they didn't really have time to think about the decision. They just had to act because it was such a big and important thing. And I'm saying we're asking for them to think about it. This is such a huge decision that it's something that needs to have a lot of thought given to it. So thank you, Assembly, and Madam Deputy Mayor and Superintendent Hauser for your time and for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Webster. I see no questions from the Assembly. Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Tanya Harelski. Danielski. Thank you. Your name and area of town in 2 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Tanya Danielski. I'm a Valley resident and I have a son at Thunder Mountain and a middle schooler. I wanted to speak out in favor of and to express appreciation to the Assembly for being willing to support the school district through this very difficult situation. And I agree that it's a combination of a lack of funding that's been coming on the state level, but there's also been some fiscal mismanagement and errors in the school. And I think it's important to move forward in a way that is thoughtful and considerate of the impact of all the students. I feel like the decision to put all of the high school students in JD is really putting an extra strain on Thunder Mountain students. Everyone in the district I know is going to feel the impact of this, but the Thunder Mountain students are the ones who are going to be losing their teachers, losing their athletic facilities potentially. My middle schooler who's been looking forward to going to Thunder Mountain for years is now facing the prospect of not having to do that. I know that the decision to consolidate into that model was made at the end of an extended meeting, 7 hours. The issues with the votes were challenging, and that I can't imagine that was not feeling rushed and pressured. Finding out that there had been this 2017 study where specialists came in and really had the time and the ability to analyze and make the best decisions for the school district seems like that's something worth putting more thought and effort and potentially going in that direction. So again, I'm expressing my support for helping the school with the funding, with some guidelines. I think it's a slippery slope for the Assembly. I don't want the Assembly to be micromanaging the school. I don't feel like that's an appropriate role, but maybe some guidance and encouragement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Danielski. And I see no questions. Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Melissa Cullum. You have 2 minutes. Please state your name and area of town you live in.
All right. Hello, my name is Melissa Cullum. I live in the Valley. I am a homeschooling parent, a retired middle school and high school language arts teacher, a former Chatham School District board member, a property owner, and someone who values education and never thought I'd be asking the Assembly to place conditions on school funding. I come here tonight to ask the Assembly to think about a few issues the current school board's consolidation model creates. The district has been hemorrhaging several $1 million a year for the last few years. This is likely to continue well into the future unless state funding is radically changed. Since an increase in funding is highly unlikely, it's imperative that the district looks beyond this rushed decision by the board, who failed to vet all options, to fix an existing and continuing problem, but instead to think of creative ways to manage an ever-shrinking budget and student population. Without a long-term plan or outline of future consolidation models, I feel funding the gap this year gives the district the green light to operate as usual. So I ask the Assembly, was the city presented with a long-term district plan to make sure we don't find ourselves in the same predicament in 2, 3, 5, 10 years? Will the city bail out the district next year, the year after? Currently, homeschool students who attend Raven or IDEA must pay to participate in all extracurricular activities in addition to paying for class time when they attend school in the Juneau School District. The current consolidation model chosen by the district will not only limit my child's access to classes, since they will be overcrowded and part-time students aren't given schedule preferences now until a few days before school begins. The district will lose funding. In addition to families like ours, many have expressed a desire to homeschool if the board doesn't vet all the options. If that happens, the school district will lose even more funding, thereby widening the deficit. My question to you is, what safeguards or conditions does the city have on this loan to make sure that the school district will repay our loans in a timely manner? And what happens if they can't repay? So before the Assembly votes, I asked you to give the loan to the school district, to ask the Assembly to make the district provide a long-term plan that outlines possible consolidation models for the future, provides a cost analysis of the consolidation model and the 712 model, so community members
You need to
know
wrap it up.
funding
You need
and
to wrap it up.
explain how each model directly impacts our students, our roadways, our neighborhood streets, sports, and travel, just to name a few. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your testimony. I see no questions from the assembly. Next, we will have lining up Joe Zerlenio, Damian Shane, and Brenda Taylor, please. You can let me know how badly I butchered your name.
I'm sorry?
Please state your name and area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
Of course. Joe Zerlingo, live in the Valley. The bottom line up front that I have is no corrective action taken constitutes an impact to the taxpayer's paycheck. Every time I see money get spent through the city, that means mill rates go up, property taxes go up, and that's a serious problem. And I'm not really sure how $9 million is overspent, but I agree that conditions do need to be set on this loan. One of the questions I also have is what we really got for the money. Our school right now, our reading is 44 and 48%. That's not percentile, that's percent out of 100. Math is 34 to 40%, and science is 59%. And that's directly from the Alaska Department of Education. As far as budget, per student, we've increased by 30% per student, which outmatches inflation and everything else. I'll just wrap up. Ultimately, we need to invest in the community and to incentivize people to actually come live here so we can increase that student population. That's not by increasing any taxes, so that's my only concern. Thank you. Yeah, of course.
Thank you for your testimony. Damian Shane. Please state your name and area of town you live in, and you've got 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, Assembly members, my name is Demian Chain. I live downtown. I have 3 kids who were born in Juneau, and now one's a sophomore, and I have twin 8th graders in our school system. Investing in schools is one of the best investments in our future that you can make, and I appreciate everyone's commitment to that cause, and I support the adoption of all the ordinances. I can only wish that you inspire the state legislatures and governor to do a better job. And I understand and share everyone's concern about the consolidation. It was a tough decision, and I don't want to crowd the classroom whatsoever either. But I don't think that this is the forum to relitigate whether it was a sound decision or not. And I think voting no on the ordinances will only make this situation worse and jeopardize the students who go to school each day to grow and learn. So I hope you vote yes on all the ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shane. Are there any questions? I see no questions. Thank you for your testimony. Brenda Taylor. Please state your name, area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Brenda Taylor. I live at the end of Mendenhall Peninsula Road, and I've never actually known whether that's the Valley or Rock Bay. So I'd love to get that question, right? We live on the same street, same issue. Anyway, my children both went through JSD K-12. They're well launched. And so I am speaking as somebody who still pays taxes, doesn't have children in the system, but absolutely supports all 3 ordinances. And I really encourage you to do that. I really appreciate having listened to your discussions, understanding that this is really a legislature and governor created issue, and that the school district is very much a part of our community. We can't separate those 2 things. I also wanted to report back tangentially, but I think relatedly, on Curiosity Unleashed, which was our K-5 STEAM event that we held last Monday. And I like to think that maybe that's why you had so few people testifying last Monday, because they all came to our event, which we had 396 children and 386 of their adults. That's K-5. And then we had 51 activities, 70 presenters, 21 TMH high school students. It was an all-community event of people just absolutely wanting to learn and be curious and wanting to share their passion. And I wish you could have been there, but I would like to say that that's why I support these 3 ordinances, that our schools and our community deserves the support for those extra tools that we need within the school day to encourage that same kind of enthusiasm that we all really have in this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Taylor. Are there any questions? Thank you for testifying. Much appreciated. Next, we have Chris Wallace, Alex Wertheimer, and Kent Murig. Mr. Wallace, you have 2 minutes. Please state your name and area of town.
I can't hear. You guys got to fix the sound system in this room. It's horrible. I can't hear a word you said. What did you say to me? I'm sorry.
I apologize. You have 2 minutes. Please state your name and area of town you live in, and it is terrible.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Chris Wallace. I live in Lemon Creek. I don't understand how we can be $9.7 million in the hole and nobody cares, and the answer is just give them more money. You cannot point to one single metric that the school district is improving performance, and despite ever-increasing amounts of money being spent for ever-shrinking number of students. I'm a sports guy. I referee hockey in the school district. I referee youth hockey. I like hockey. But to support sports, and I just saw on the agenda, $2.9 million for a baseball field, but we can't afford classrooms. Come on, guys, let's get our priorities straight. Schools are great for sports, but that's not what they're for. They're for educating kids. If that's where we're going to spend our money, then let's at least be honest about it. And loaning the school district $4.1 million, I haven't seen an amortization table. I haven't seen any terms, anything about interest rates. And you take an organization that spent itself $9.7 million in debt. You think you're going to pay it back $4.1 million in loan? There's not a bank in the world to loan the school district a dime of money, and we shouldn't be doing it with taxpayer money. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Wallace? Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Alex Wertheimer.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Alex Wertheimer. I'm a resident of the Lynn Canal District. My wife Peggy and I sent you comments last week strongly supporting the 3 ordinances you are considering tonight on school funding. Our children attended K through 12 in Juneau and both graduated well prepared and to be successful when they went on to university. Our oldest grandchild is now in kindergarten at Ock Bay School. We want our grandkids to have the educational opportunities that our children had in Juneau Public Schools. The schools are the core of our community. Good public schools are essential for providing for our children's future and for Juneau's future as well. Without good schools, we are not going to keep or attract young families, and our population base and school enrollment will continue to decline. This perfect storm of declining state support, incorrect assumptions on enrollment and revenue, and massive accounting errors have left the schools in an untenable budget position without assistance of the city. Large-scale layoffs and exploding student-teacher ratios will devastate the schools and damage our community. Thank you for coming up with a plan to make it possible for the Juneau School Board to reconfigure, restructure, and rebudget so that we can maintain quality public schools into the future. I wanted to reiterate our support for these ordinances and also to encourage you to consider modifying Ordinance 2024-01BA for funding non-instructional costs in FY25. Could you make that funding contingent on the BSA increase approved by the legislature, with the amount increasing up to the $3.9 million proposed for the FY24 budget if the governor, as expected, vetoes the BSA increase? As I understand the current budget projection, and as Superintendent Hauser showed us, the BSA increase would alleviate the need for teacher layoffs in FY25, but if it is vetoed, the district will need to lay off perhaps dozens of teachers and increase student-teacher ratios at all levels. Please consider this contingency for Ordinance 2024-01BA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wertheimer. Are there any questions? Seeing no questions, is Kent Murig in the audience? Mr. Murig, yes, Madam Clerk.
I just wanted to let you know that Mr. Assemblymember Smith has switched to phone, so we're not going to be seeing him over the Zoom, but he is online and is available to speak whenever he chooses to speak. But I wanted to be sure you were aware, since we're not seeing him on the Zoom anymore.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Please state your name and area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes. And I apologize for the sound.
Thank you. My name's Kent Merrig. I live in the Mendenhall Valley. I teach at Thunder Mountain High School. I have a daughter who attends Glacier Valley Elementary. I have an older daughter who goes to Thunder Mountain High School. She is a sophomore this year. I am here tonight to thank the Assembly for the consideration of these ordinances and the support of students in the Juneau community and of the school district. I'm asking also that you consider some possible contingencies. Honestly, I think a lot of us who are here don't really even know what that would look like. But in response to some things that were said earlier about the school board and the district central office reaching out to stakeholders, including educators within the school district and in the affected high schools and middle schools, I could say that that did not happen to the degree that it should have, facing the sort of decisions that are ahead of the school district in light of this budget deficit. I think I might be the only Thunder Mountain teacher here tonight testifying. That doesn't mean I'm the only one who cares. I know that there would be others here if this wasn't as an emotionally charged issue for them as they consider not just their livelihoods, but their passion in life of meeting the needs of students in this community. And also others that would be here if they weren't worried about the repercussions of their participation in an event like this. So please, you have something. We have had nothing. We have tried to communicate about the deficits that this will cause to our students to move forward with the current plan, and that has been met with deaf ears. We're asking for you to speak for us in a way that can be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murig. Are there any questions from Assembly members? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony. And next we have April Gilbert, Janessa Weary, and Riley Sobolov. Please line up. Ms. Gilbert, your name, please, and area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
Excellent. My name is April Gilbert, and I live in the Valley. I wanted to agree with a lot of the comments that have been made, and I want to make another point that I think is important, and it's the importance of having a neighborhood school on all socioeconomic impacts that have on the students. Having a school that is within walking distance, having a place where if a student is late for school, they can walk to school if they've missed a bus, where they can walk to activities if they want to participate in sports. When you consolidate the schools and have asked 2/3 of the students to have to ride a bus down to downtown, means that there are students who might have parents who won't have the opportunity to be able to pick them up after school, who won't be able to participate in those after school activities. Students identify with the things that they do, those activities, and that's what often makes them want to participate in school. The volleyball team had 60 girls try out for it. I know in JD, there were close to 50. When there's one school, there is no way that a student or that a coach could handle 110 girls. But by having separate schools, that means that those girls all had to have grade checks every 2 weeks. Those girls who have parents who might not be paying attention had instead teachers who paid attention and encouraged them to make sure that they got their grades up, make sure that they could play, had that supervision. Having a neighborhood school is important. Having 2 schools that are 7 through 12 means that we get to keep both high schools. We get to have both both areas of school have students have a neighborhood school that they could choose to go to if they decide. I also repeatedly have heard that the most important decision was to be able to offer more classes, a more variety of classes, or more accelerated classes. But that only helps those who are elite, those who want to take those AP classes, and doesn't take into effect those students who are not as advanced and just need to graduate, and instead puts them at a disadvantage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Ms. Gilbert. I see no questions from Assembly members. Thank you. Next, Janessa, and I'm just going to ask you to say your name, please, and your area.
My name is Janessa Luera,
Thank you.
and thank you all for allowing us to speak tonight.
And you live in the valley.
Yes, I live in the valley,
Thank you.
sorry.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
I am not a public speaker. I'm very reserved when it comes to standing up, speaking out, so I'm very upset and emotional. I apologize. It's really hard for me to do this.
You can take a deep breath, yeah.
And I just wanted to say that, so I am a 1998 graduate from Juneau Douglas High School. I have a lot of school pride. I love it, but I have had my kids and my sisters grow up with choosing Thunder Mountain High School on their own, and they've thrived there. And that Valley School has been very a big blessing to our family, being close to our home, making it easy for us to drop them off, pick them up, take them to appointments and anything that we need to do. And I am very saddened and concerned with the Juneau School Board's rush decision to reconfigure and go back to a one-school model. I feel like we're going backwards, and I would like to ask that you guys please consider putting a stipulation on the loan or having them go back and reevaluate Model 6 and 7 to 12 model. I think it's very important to the community, and I think that we need to have two bigger schools that are more identical in size, especially as we continue to decline, because 7 to 8 is only going to get smaller. So thank you guys so much for allowing us to speak, and we appreciate you. And I'm in support of the funding for the school, but I definitely want some 7 to 12 model to be looked at if possible by the board.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate that. I see no questions from assembly members. Riley Soboloff.
Hello.
State your name and area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Riley Sobleff, and I'm a freshman student at Thunder Mountain High School and live in the Auk Bay area. My parents are both graduates of Juneau Douglas High School, and as a student, I do not deserve to be the one who has to pay for these financial issues by losing my high school. We are the students who had 2 school years affected by COVID. The amount of change in our lives we have already gone through is massive. Adding more change will lead to larger mental health problems, drug use, and potential school shootings in our new crowded building. School assembly members have been saying that there will be more opportunities. I don't see how putting 1,000 students in a building and cutting numbers of teachers will give us the opportunity we deserve. If I go to Juneau Douglas High School, I personally will do part-time school and not go full-time. I will not participate in as many athletics and opportunities and athletics clubs or opportunities that I'm currently in. Next section. High school is arguably the most important year in a student's life, and cutting half the opportunities for a high school student will affect their whole schooling and future career. This will cause many students to lose opportunities on their resume, therefore losing chances for college. This is not a long-term solution for our community, and the school board is aware of this, that this is not going to fully fix our financial issues. I don't know why we would cut a perfectly amazing school just for this issue to continue going on in our community. If Thunder Mountain closes, I will lose trust in our school board, and overall in our school district. I will not come back to Juneau after college and will find a stronger school system to live around. Do not throw good CBJ money at a bad Juneau school board decision without either strings or reconsideration of a poor decision made in an illegal haste. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. I see no questions from assembly members. Thank you. Next, the last 2 people signed up to testify are Jenny Thomas and Lisa Matson. Ms. Thomas, please state your name and area of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Jenny Thomas, and I live in the Valley. I have 2 children at Thunder Mountain High School, and I was not planning on testifying, but after listening to a couple of the things that were presented, I had some points I wanted to make. That we're not asking for there to be no funding. We're just asking for you to help us make the school district listen to us. We've done several attempts, got no response. You guys this evening asked Superintendent a question about models that he considered, and all he said was there were models considered, but he never said why they were discounted or why he chose to go with the 9 through 12 or the board went through 9 through 12. There's no answers. So we just want answers. We want explanations, and you're the last resort to kind of help us out since they're choosing not to listen to us. Thanks.
I see no questions from Assembly members. Ms. Lisa Mattson.
Thank you.
Say name and area.
Sure. Lisa Mattson, out the road, Lena Loop. Like Jenny, I wasn't going to speak tonight, as you can tell from my scribble scratch, but I feel I owe it to my son, who's 3rd generation born and raised. He's a Thunder Mountain High School senior, and this has, like so many students have testified, really put a damper on what should be a celebratory year for our students. I went to JDHS, but there was no choice back then. My son chose Thunder Mountain High School. Neighborhood schools are important. Having a choice is important. The Model 6 needs to be vetted. It wasn't. I feel that if we don't give our students a choice and have neighborhood schools and look at all models presented, that we're only backsliding. As somebody who was born and raised in this town, the Valley and the people of Juneau put it on the ballot multiple years and fought for a Valley High School. We're only backsliding and doing harm to our future generations. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I see no questions. That is the end of our public testimony. Is there any way we can tone the echo down, Madam Clerk? How's that? Much better. Thank you. Assembly members, do you want to take a 5-minute break? I'm seeing a nod before we consider the ordinances. So we will take a 5-minute break, and we will be back at 8:56. Thank you. I call the assembly back to order at 8:59 PM. Madam Clerk, will you please introduce item 11 for us for public hearing?
This is ordinance 2023-14, version B, AD, an ordinance providing for a one-time loan of fiscal year 24 to the Juneau School District for up to $4.1 million.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
In 2024, the Juneau School District suddenly discovered a current year structural deficit of approximately $9.5 million as a result of years of insufficient state funding, overprojecting enrollment, and financial mismanagement. The Board of Education took immediate action to make cuts to the 2024 budget. However, the magnitude of the deficit is too great to address through cuts in the current school year. This ordinance, along with a companion general fund ordinance, appropriates approximately $4.1 million from the restricted budget reserve as a loan to enable the school district to complete the current school year. These funds will be used to pay for instructional costs, while the companion general fund ordinance will be used to pay for non-instructional costs. The Assembly and its committees discussed this topic multiple times in the last 2 months, January 29th, January 30th, February 7th, February 23rd, February 26th, including holding a public hearing at the February 26th Committee of the Whole meeting. I recommend the Assembly adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. And just as a reminder, we have been taking testimony on all three ordinances, financial ordinances that are before us. We are going to consider and vote on them one by one. I would let the Assembly know that before we entertain a motion, we can speak to these ordinances, and we'll be doing them one at a time. So if anybody has comments before we entertain a motion, please give those now. Ms., did you have a question? Did I hear, Mr. Kelly?
I was just wondering if this would now be appropriate time to ask more questions, or are we're just doing comments at this point?
Ask questions of whom?
Well, I had a few people in mind, the attorney, the superintendent, and possibly the manager.
Yeah, this is fine to ask questions. Ms. Euskandis, did you want to go first, or do you want Mr. Kelly to go first?
If he has questions, he can go first.
Okay.
I have just comments in response to the
Okay,
testimony.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I think I'll direct this first one at Superintendent Hauser.
Superintendent Hauser. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Superintendent Hauser. We've heard a lot of testimony this evening about people who aren't satisfied with the school consolidation plan that was chosen by the school board. At this point, I'm just wondering what the practicalities are. What are the challenges that would be associated with changing the plan this year or next year?
Superintendent Hauser.
Through the chair, to Member Kelly, the board has voted and adopted a reorganization and consolidation model. We're moving forward with that process. We've been putting together a budget with the assumptions with that reorganization plan in place. I guess the question is, what would be if there's a change to what that would look like? Is that the question? Like, what would be if there were potentially the process to change that? Just want to make sure I'm.
Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, like what are the challenges that would be implicated with changing the school consolidation for this year or next year at this point in the process?
Well, I guess, like I said, the board has adopted a model. From a change perspective, that would have to go through another process. Per the Assembly and the City and Borough of Juneau's, charter to have an adopted budget by the board, that's a balanced budget that is due by April 5th. The assembly is requested, or at least, we're trying to get that to the board adopted budget to the assembly by the 15th of March. So they can start working through your process to have that in place. To go through and change or try to change that, it would start, I don't know how we'd be able to budget on that. So we would not be able to budget on a new model moving forward. And so I'm not sure as far as when that would happen. We would not be able to budget on that. And so there'd be I'm not sure how to be able to move forward to get a budget to the board to review and adopt if there was a request to change from what was adopted already by the board.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you.
Mr. Kelly, you had another question?
I think it can wait.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Uskandis.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. It's not every assembly meeting. In fact, it's the opposite. Most assembly meetings that all the chairs in the room are filled, and that we go through pages and pages of testimony. And we received tons of email testimony as well on this topic. So I want to start by thanking you all for coming out to testify, and especially thank our students who testified, teachers, but for all of you, I think I can only speak for myself as one member, but I know that we have all taken the time to read through these and listen to you, and it is very helpful when you have shared your stories with us, and they have been hard to listen to, and I start with appreciation there. I think sometimes what's lost is this is a terrible situation we're in, but sometimes there's a lot of, it can be hard to understand the city's systems, and when something like this isn't happening and someone sends me a question that's for the school board, I just throw it over there and I say, oh, that's not for me, that's for the school board. And sometimes there are hard questions, and then it's great because it's one hard question I don't have to deal with and the school board gets to deal with it. So throughout this process, it's been very hard because the school board has been in an impossible situation dealing with a very, very hard problem to solve. And together, the city, this is one where we are all in it together. This is also for the assembly. We don't have the luxury of saying we don't have to work on solving this problem, because with the power of the purse, we are tied to helping the school board solve this problem. But we are two separate and separately elected bodies with separate duties. And while we can levy taxes and we decide how much money they get, at the end of the day, the school board is who decides what happens in those buildings, what those models look like, really all of the policy questions. And throughout the budget process in the 4 or 5 years that I've been on the assembly, sometimes we start asking questions about the weeds of how something's going to be done, or expressing whether we like something the school board is doing or something we don't like the school board is doing. And frequently that leads to questions to the attorney. Do we have control over this? Can we tell the school board what to do in this instance? And this is really an extreme example of something like a consolidation model is really not for the assembly to tell the school board. We do have the legal power to put stipulations on a loan, but we really don't, and it has been tested in Alaska courts, we really don't have the legal ability to tell them what happens within the school. We decide how much funding to give them, and that is it. And we're in an extreme situation, period, an extremely terrible situation where we're doing much more and it's hard to follow a lot of moving pieces. But I just want to say for myself that if we move forward without talking about consolidation models, it is not because you are not heard, and it is not because we do not care or have our own personal opinions about what might be best for the community to do, but really that is, for me as an assembly member, my job is to decide how much financial funding and what is the best way to provide that financial funding to the school district. And what are reasonable things that are tied really to the financial pieces of it, not to dictate what that model looks like. So that was just something I wanted to communicate on, as so much of what we have heard has been around the models. So that's a very long-winded way, but it's important for me that you understand that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hughes-Gandes. Next, I have Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, and that's a tough act to follow. You articulated, Ms. Hughes-Gandes, you articulated a lot of my feelings very well, and that was in part why I asked the question to Superintendent Hauser. I want to make sure that people know that this is something that we have been considered, that we have, I mean, that's, well, first of all, yeah, we are separate elected bodies. The matters of school policy belong with the school district. Matters passing ordinances and raising taxes and other items along that fall more under our purview. I wanted to make sure that like our priorities, but my priority in considering this ordinance and voting on this ordinance is but my first priority is the students. And I do hear the community's concerns about wanting to see transparency, and I support that, and I believe that's reasonable, especially when we're spending taxpayer money. But my first priority in whatever vote I take this evening is going to be for our students.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Are there further comments by Assembly members? Mr. Bryson, do we have a motion?
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2023-14BAD, an ordinance approving one-time loan in FY24 to the Juneau School District up to $4.1 million, and I ask for unanimous consent.
I see an objection by Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I object for the purposes of making an amendment.
Mr. Kelly, can you describe your amendment?
Sure. So you will find it in the red folder. Considering a lot of the testimony that we've heard today, I have decided that I am only I've decided that I am only going to move amendment number 2, the second part of the amendment at this time. So I move to amend ordinance 2023-14 BAD as follows: to support the Juneau School District, help the community rebuild public trust, and improve budget transparency. To insert the additional term into section 3D on page 3, section 3, terms. The CBJ Assembly authorizes the manager to enter into a loan agreement with the Juneau School District for an amount of up to $4.1 million with the following essential terms. The loan period is 5 years. The first payment is due no later than fiscal year 26, and the interest rate shall be 0%, and no later than fiscal year 26, the Juneau School District must publish a budget book available to the public no later than when the annual budget is submitted to the Assembly. I'm going to ask for unanimous consent.
Are there any objections? Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. For a question for the maker of the motion. Excuse me. I'm curious, well, I think my first question is, is the purpose of requiring a budget book, and I imagine you mean a printed hard copy budget book for the assembly or for the public?
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I think what is available to the public is available also to the assembly, so my intention is that it's available for everybody.
Excellent. And I'm curious about the date. So you would want this at the same time that the annual budget is submitted to the assembly, which feels early to me, given I know it takes considerable amount of time to put together a budget book. Is there a reason that you want it by that date? As that would, I imagine, push the school district budget timeline up quite a bit.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. The actual date, fiscal year 26, was actually something that came through with drafting with the city attorney.
Mr. Kelly, I believe the question is no later than when the annual budget is submitted. That's what you're referring to.
All right.
Maybe I could make an amendment to your amendment.
I might also ask the city attorney why. Never mind.
So I'm going to, you could make an amendment to the amendment, but we also have Ms. Atkinson and Wahaldi Doc who would like to speak to this. Would you like to hear them speak?
I can wait, yes.
Okay, Ms. Atkinson.
I'd also like to object for a purpose of a question. I understand this might be a question for Superintendent Hauser. Don't school districts have to submit their operating budgets to the state, which is then published on the state's website by July 15th? So wouldn't this be sort of a redundancy, or is there a difference in those kind of reports?
Superintendent.
Through Deputy Mayor Hale. Yes, state statute requires that the district submit its budget for the next year to the state by July 15th.
Ms. Atkinson.
Follow-up. And that's available publicly?
Yeah, sorry about that, through the chair. To Deputy Mayor Hale, yes, that is publicly accessible and available.
Thank you. Do you remove your objection or do you maintain it? You maintain it? Thank you. Wahaldi Doc.
Yeah, this is for a question for the maker of the motion. It's just, trying to get a better understanding, Mr. Kelly, of your intent behind this motion. Trying to understand what the purpose is here.
Mr. Kelly.
My purpose was just to improve the transparency. Every year that I served on the school board, this booklet was published. I did see emailed comments from people who were weighing in on the matter. And one of the things that they objected to, I also, in consultation with former assembly members, there was a lot of difficulty in getting the information in prior years. My motion here is to make this more accessible, more available to the public, and to approve both transparency and the appearance of transparency.
Well, good, Doc. Would you like follow-up?
My follow-up is for Mr. Hauser. Just kind of curious to that point that Mr. Kelly just mentioned, just also thinking, I guess this is a separate question, so I'll wait to see if there's other questions.
Are there other questions or objections? I will object to Mr. Kelly's motion. Oh, Ms. Euskandis?
Let me interrupt you in the middle of yours. I'll
Okay.
throw one in.
I will object to Mr. Kelly's motion. It's my understanding from discussions with the school board and the school superintendent that they do plan to publish a budget book. There are sort of innumerable things that we could slip into this as conditions, and they have expressed their intention to do that. I just don't know that we need to put that as a condition of the loan. So that's my objection. Ms. Euskandis and then Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yeah, first of all, should we have a budget book that's as detailed as the budget that we have at the city? Absolutely. And I think that's something we've talked about with the school board. And we talked about at our last joint meeting. And so I'm looking at Superintendent Hauser. And as far as dates go and whether it belongs in this, philosophically, I completely agree. We need to get to that level of detail. And we haven't had that level of detail, including on the years that you were on the assembly. The deed is not the same as what we see if we look at the city level. But that's something that I think the school district already knows and was updating us on. So I see Mr. Hauser nodding, but my question is just to say, can you confirm that that's true? Because I think you gave us a date when we met jointly, and also as far as if maybe there's an amendment coming that will make me like this more, I would want to, there's still work to be done by the school district, so I would want it to be something that you could accomplish as a secondary. So if you have feelings about that, if you could answer that.
Superintendent Hauser, can you share your feelings?
I would be happy to, Deputy Mayor Hill, Team Member Hughes-Candies. Yes, I will share my feelings. My feelings are, I do believe a budget book should be available and accessible that outlines, the district's budget. It is clear and, is broken down so people know. And I've always stated my goal is to make sure that we're reinforcing that the Juneau School District is good stewards of the money that's provided to the district, not only from the state, but from the assembly, which really from the community. And so that is an intent. And Ms. Pierce and I, the school finance officer that we brought in to help us with this process, I know Member Muldoon as well, Chair of the Finance Committee. We have all had conversations about the desire and our goals of getting to a budget book to make available.
Thank you. Mr. Bryson.
Well, that makes my next statement really easy. I was going to just speak in support of a budget book and hopefully an amendment that allows for the budget book to arrive at a time that is conducive to the school district, the state requirements, and to the public being able to see it in a timely fashion. No pressure, Ms. Wool. But thank you, Mr. Kelly, for bringing this forward. I think this does speak to some of the sideboards that I think that we were asked about today, that we do have an interest in holding the school district accountable as we go through this. And I think the budget book is a way that we can help maybe prevent this from happening again in the future. Thank you for the time.
Ms. Wall, did you have an amendment?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I will make an amendment that says the Juneau School District must publish a budget book available to the public after adoption by the Assembly, and ask for unanimous consent.
Are there any objections? I see no objection to that amendment to the amendment. Now we will return to Mr. Kelly's original amendment, which now reads, Madam Clerk, do you have the language of the original amendment once amended, now amended?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yes, so this would change. I will put this on the screen and so you can read along with me and see the amendment that, if I can find my share screen option. Okay, so section D of, that's found on line 23 here, where it says no later than fiscal year 26, the Juneau School District must publish a budget book available to the public. And then instead of saying no later than when the annual budget is submitted to the Assembly, it would now say to the public after adoption by the Assembly. with Ms. Wall's amendment.
Are there objections to the amended amendment? Ms. Wall?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. You know, my amendment helped me feel better about this language because it's less prescriptive about the timing, but I still don't think this is necessary. I think we all like a budget book. The school district has said they are interested in doing that as well. And I believe that, you know, improvement, our body's abilities to work together means trusting each other when we spell out our intent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Ms. Atkinson?
Just an objection for purposes of a question. The way this is written, it's not clear to me if this would be a thing required annually in perpetuity or if it would just be this one time for FY26. And I guess I'm just wondering which it is, if it's a perpetuity requirement or if it would be just one time.
As maker of the amendment, Mr. Kelly, your intent.
Thank you. My intent was that it would be in perpetuity.
I'll remove my objection.
Thank you. Are there further objections? Wahalgadak.
Yeah, this is the second question I guess I had for Mr. Hauser. Just curious to hear from you about what does the school district think about, you know, this type of prescription as it relates to the loan?
Superintendent Hauser.
Yeah, through Deputy Mayor Hale. Like I stated earlier, the goal of at least my administration, and what I've communicated is that we are and want to be able to put together a budget book to be able to be reflective of our budget, provide that for the board as well through our budgeting process. And so as a stipulation of the loan to make sure that that budget book starting in FY26, it is something that we are planning on putting together and moving forward with as we are, continuing to update some of our accounting software and making sure that we're in the process of putting together a very clear budget that has the resources for the community to be able to go through and look through a budget book to be able to identify where the spending is. And so that is something that we are planning on doing anyways. And so as a stipulation of the loan, it's something we were planning on doing. So I don't see it as being something that would be any different than what we're going to do through the term of the loan.
Thank you, Superintendent Hauser. Does that answer your question, Wahalgadak? And do you remove or maintain your objection?
I'll remove my objection.
Thank you. Seeing no further objections, I will state my objection. We are two distinct bodies. We have had a big mess that has needed to be figured out. I think it is important that we not minimize the role of state funding in this very big mess that we've got. The school district has cut and cut, just like school districts all over the state have cut and cut and cut, and so they've been very bare bones. We have talked about an improved relationship between the two bodies. I think it's clear that we are already there and we will continue to grow in that direction. I just don't feel that I feel like this is micromanaging and I don't support it. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, Acting Mayor. While I hear the reasons to maybe not require this in code now, what has got us in this predicament that we're in right now is the fact that a previous superintendent in a previous budget manner did not create a budget book, and it had errors in it that have cost every student and every teacher in this community untold heartache. So while we're solving this situation right now, and we know the need for the budget book now, I do believe that's important to put it in code so that no school board will ever be able to make the same grievous error that was made that got us to this situation. So by putting in code that the school district has to provide a budget book, we will prevent the very situation that we're trying to get ourselves out of right now. So it is a step in the right direction. And so I understand it's a little bit weedy to deal with it for school year 26 and fiscal year 27, but fast forward 5 years in the future after that, 10 more years after that, by requiring in code that the school district has to have a budget book, we will, at the very least, prevent the exact problem that we're here trying to solve today. So I'm very much supportive of Mr. Kelly's amendment, and I call the question. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Madam Clerk, will you please call roll on this question? On the amendment, the amended amendment.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Procedurally, we would have to vote on Mr. Bryson's motion to call the question, but I will just call the amendment. Thank you.
It's okay.
For Mr. Kelly's initial amendment as amended by Ms. Wall's amendment, and Mr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Adkisson?
Yes.
Walakida?
No.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Wall?
No.
Ms. Hughes Candies?
Yes.
Mr. Bryson?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Hill?
No.
Motion carries. We have 5 yeas and 3 nays.
Now, to the original motion by Mr. Bryson, are there any objections to that motion? Seeing no objections,
Because we can't see Mr. Smith, we do need to roll call vote for any motions that are before us.
Okay, and then I think that was actually the original motion as amended.
Yes.
Thank you. Will you please do a roll call vote?
Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
For ordinance 2023-14 BAD as amended, Mr. Bryson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson?
Yes.
Walakida?
Yes.
Ms. Wall?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Hughes Candies?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Hill?
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous consent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will move on to item 12 on the agenda. Madam Clerk. In a moment.
This is ordinance 2023-14, version B, AB, an ordinance providing up to $3,922,787 to the Juneau School District for non-instructional costs for fiscal year '24.
Madam Manager.
In 2024, the Juneau School District suddenly discovered a current year structural deficit of approximately $9.5 million as a result of years of insufficient state funding, over-projecting enrollment, and financial mismanagement. The Board of Education took immediate action to make cuts to the 2024 budget. However, the magnitude of the deficit is too great to address through cuts in the current school year. This ordinance, along with a companion loan ordinance, appropriates approximately $3.9 million from the general fund to enable the school district to complete the current school year. These funds will be used to pay for non-instructional costs, while the companion loan funds will be used to pay for instructional costs. The Assembly and its committees discussed this topic multiple times in the last 2 months, January 29th, January 30th, February 7th, February 23rd, and February 26th, including holding a public hearing at the February 26th Committee of the Whole meeting. I recommend the Assembly adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Bringing it back to the Assembly, Ms. Euskandis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I move that the Assembly adopt ordinance 2023-14BAB, and I ask for unanimous consent.
So, that's correct. I'm sorry, I was reading the long line. Are there any objections?
Oh, Mr. Smith, we need to do a roll call.
Oh, thank you. Madam,
Madam Deputy Mayor.
yes, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to, I did just want to let you know, I'm going to have to hang up soon. My flight is taking off. Anyway, appreciate the work of the Assembly. This is obviously very challenging, and but I'm proud that we are stepping up to help where we can. Obviously, our role is to help with the financing, but happy to support this, but this will probably be my last vote before I'm going to have to go, but I thank everyone for the patience.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith, and thank you for hanging in there. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll on this vote?
Thank you. Mr. Smith, how do you vote on this ordinance?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. And Ms. Euskandis?
Yes.
Mr. Bryson? Ms. Wall?
Yes.
Walahokita?
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
And Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous consent.
Mr. Smith, will you please maybe just send a text when you have to leave so we'll know you're gone? Thank you.
Very good. I'm about to drop off right now. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you so much for hanging in there. Moving on to item 13, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This is ordinance 2024-01, version B, large letter A. An ordinance providing up to $1,650,405 to the Juneau School District for non-instructional costs for fiscal year 25.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
In 2024, the Juneau School District suddenly discovered a current year structural deficit of approximately $9.5 million as a result of years of insufficient state funding, overprojecting enrollment, and financial mismanagement. The Board of Education took immediate action to make cuts to the 2024 budget. However, the magnitude of the deficit is too great to address through cuts in the current school year and will continue to be challenging in fiscal year 25. This ordinance appropriates approximately $1.65 million from the general fund to support JSD in fiscal year 25 by covering non-instructional costs in fiscal year 25 as CBJ and JSD plan for the potential transition of facility maintenance services to CBJ. The Assembly and its committees discussed this topic multiple times in the last 2 months, January 29th, January 30th, February 7th, February 23rd, February 26th, including holding a public hearing at the February 26th Committee of the Whole meeting. I recommend the Assembly adopt this ordinance.
Bringing this back to the Assembly, Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I move the Assembly approve ordinance 2024-01BA, an ordinance providing up to $1,650,405 to the Juneau School District for non-instructional costs, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Are there any objections? I will,
Do you mind if I object for a quick comment?
Please do.
Thank you. Just wanted to, again, thank everyone for being here and for testifying. Ms. Euskandis did a great job of describing why that matters. I know that we have gotten comments from folks who, know that this is a lot of money that the city is spending on the school district, and we can point fingers all we want at how we got here, but I think at the end of the day, the Assembly has an opportunity to support our students by providing this funding, and so I'm proud to do that. I do also hear the folks that, want to make sure that there's accountability moving forward and within the bounds of what is our role on the assembly. There are conditions in these ordinances, making sure that CBJ has better access to JSD finances so that we can collaborate better, and that the school district will eventually be providing a plan for how they get to a balanced budget in the future. So just wanted to make sure people understood that is part of our actions tonight, assuming this pass. Thank you. I'll remove my objection.
Thank you, Mrs. Candies. Are there any other objections? I will object for purposes of a statement as well. I appreciate that. I want to echo what Mrs. Candies and Ms. Wall have said, and I also want to say that we are two separate elected bodies. The school district is elected separately by the voters, and the assembly is elected separately, and we do not have oversight over the school district, and that's it per our charter, and it's set up that way, probably for a lot of reasons, and it sometimes frustrates a lot of us, and I'm sure a lot of you. So thank you very much for your testimony. I also want to talk about the amount of this ordinance, which is 1.65 million, as opposed to the ordinance for FY24, which was 3.9 million. This is, there have been many, many years of what's called cost shifting by the state. So as the state's finances have gotten worse and worse, they have cost shifted more and more costs down to municipalities. And we would very much like to hold the line with this 1.65 million. And we see that cost shifting happening right now, as Superintendent Hauser has said, with the threat to veto the BSA increase. So the Assembly has done everything we can to help move the school district out of this crisis. We appreciate very much what the school board has done to move beyond it as well, and what the school district has done. But this has been an effort many years in the making, and it's continuing. And that's why the amount this year is for FY25 is smaller than for FY24, because that is money that the state should be paying. Thank you, and I will remove my objection. And now I do not believe we have to call roll because we do not have Mr. Smith on the line. So I had asked for unanimous, or Ms. Wall had asked for unanimous consent. I see no objections. So that ordinance has passed. Thank you all for being here. Do we want a brief break before we move on, or should we just move on to the next item? Move right on. Okay. Madam Clerk, item number 14. Superintendent Hauser, thank you very much for being here. And members of the school board, thank you so much for being here.
This is
And members of
ordinance
the
2023-32, an ordinance clarifying the process for electing an assembly member due to a midterm vacancy.
Madam Manager.
The date when an office of the Assembly is vacant dictates whether the Assembly appoints a successor or the voters elect a successor. The Assembly enacted CBJ Code 11.10.040A to prescribe how vacant Assembly member positions are filled. While that code provision provides a helpful standard, it does not provide specificity when a midterm vacancy occurs, whether the Assembly appoints or the voters elect. This ordinance clarifies that ambiguity. If a midterm vacancy occurs more than 60 days from the election, then the voters elect the vacant position. If a midterm vacancy occurs within 60 days of an election, then the Assembly appoints an interim and the vacancy would be placed on the subsequent year's election. The Assembly Human Resources Committee recommended this ordinance at its meeting on November 28th, 2023. The Systemic Racism Review Committee considered this ordinance at its meeting on February 6, 2024. I recommend the Assembly adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Are there any members of the public that would wish to testify on this ordinance? Seeing no members of the public, I bring it back to the Assembly. Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2023-32 and ask for unanimous consent.
I see an objection by Mr. Kelly. Is there one by Mr. Bryson, or no? Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I object for the purposes well, I guess first, my intention is to make an amendment, but first I'd like to ask a question.
Please do.
Thank you. So I was kind of looking at the schedule of how ordinances, excuse me, look at my thoughts. I was looking at the schedule of how people file to run for election, which is something that I am recently familiar with myself. And I noticed that the last day to file is actually 71 days, or actually, yeah, 71 days before the election. And so I guess my question to the attorney is what happens if someone, if there's an unplanned resignation or a vacancy that occurs another way after, between 71 and 60 days?
Mr. Attorney or Madam Clerk.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Kelly, for raising this issue. So as currently drafted, it would be, the deadline would be 60 days. So as long as the individual resigned before day 60, that position would go on the ballot. If that position, if the person resigned closer to day 60 to the election, then they simply would appoint that individual, and the individual would theoretically sit in the seat for roughly 14 months.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor and Mr. Kelly. Exactly what Mr. Palmer said, but with one clarification, I guess I might point out. Yes, the position would be on the ballot, but because the candidate filing period will have already ended, that could only be a write-in candidate if it was in that 60-day window. If you were to change the timing and it's no longer 60 days, if it was anywhere between the 81 and 71 timeframe where the candidate filing period is still open, then somebody could choose to do a petition, candidate nominating petition, and file for office and have their name on the ballot. But right now, the way the ordinance is currently written, the name would not appear on the ballot, but the position, the seat would be, vote for no more than X number of seats. That would increase the number of seats that you would see available on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Kelly, we have some questions. Is that all right before you make an amendment, propose an amendment? Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Interim Mayor. This was the very question that I came up with as well, because I'm actually serving in a seat that had a 1 year, that Mayor Weldon actually had left the assembly seat, left this seat that I'm sitting in now to go run for another office. And so I was gonna, hopefully that the amendment was gonna say 81 days. So that way, if another person came off to go, whether they had to go to an emergency or they came off to go run for office, that it would leave the filing period open so that it would be fair to the community to run for those seats and we wouldn't have somebody appointed for 14 months. So I like where Mr. Kelly's going with this. I was really hoping his amendment was going to land on 81 days because that would have put it coincide with when the application period or the registration period for running for that seat starts.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Mr.
the time.
Bryson. And I believe, though, that there would still, even if it was 81 days, then somebody could be, the amount between the days, 60 and the election or 81 in the election, or whatever that might be, the assembly would still have to appoint and so the assembly would still have to appoint and there would still be somebody serving for 14 months.
My understanding is if we make this at 81 days, that goes to the beginning of the registration period for the new election. So if anybody left prior to that, you're saying that if you think that if they left between that that 81 days.
or whatever day it is, but yes, there
it
would
be
still
on
serve.
until the next.
That's correct. Perhaps we could ask Mr. Palmer to confirm that.
Let me see if I can't help a little bit. So if the date changed from day 60 to day 81, and somebody resigned a midterm between day 81 and day 30-ish, then the assembly would have the ability to appoint somebody like has happened in the past. And if that position was vacant by at least day 30, but actually a little bit more, then theoretically that position could be placed on the ballot for the voters, but it would only be done for somebody who's doing a write-in candidate. So there's some deadlines that are really tight on this, but day 81-ish is a reasonable number if you want to use that instead of day 60.
Ms. Euskandis.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. I think I either need a frame of reference, and I don't want to drag us all through the ringer at this late hour. I could also take a 2-minute at ease to not do this on mic, but the numbers we're talking about, 60, 80, even with the ordinance in front of me, without a calendar, I'm a very visual person, and knowing like what time of year we're talking about, so I can think of examples, like, oh, I know when someone, I'm telling you guys, it's gonna be ugly. I'll get out what's in my red folder, because my red folder was just held up to me, but as an example, someone could say in response to a question, we're talking about the situation that just happened where Mr. Jones was appointed, and this would make this codified or not, but using the numbers, this still doesn't help me. Like, I need to know if we're counting down or we're counting up, because this is a little bit of a nightmare.
Mr. Palmer, and before you speak, Ms. Wall, I'd like to make a comment.
Sure. So the clerks did a fantastic job anticipating a little bit of these questions, and in your red folder, roughly page 5-ish, you'll see a list with quick reference dates for this year's election. And so halfway down at the bottom, you can see that day 81 would be July 12th, and day 60 would be August 2nd, just to give you some dates to work with.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. As we were talking this morning with staff, as I was talking this morning with staff, one thing that we definitely talked about was bumping this back to a committee, because we're trying to talk about something that I'm also a visual person, and I actually just have to have a timeline with things laid out and like colors and stuff like that, and we don't have the opportunity to do that in this meeting. So Ms. Wall had a comment, and then Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I was going to suggest sending this back to committee, because if there's still details like this, I read it, I understood it with the details that the committee had worked on, but if we're going to be tweaking those, I'd prefer it go back to committee and then see it. So if maybe I'll ask Mr. Kelly if he is thinking about a amendment that maybe he considers sending it to committee instead.
Mr. Kelly.
Considering the discussion we're having right now, my original amendment was going to be to move it to 81 days, but if it would be better served to move this back to committee, I think I'll make that motion instead. I move that we refer this ordinance back to the committee of the whole and ask for unanimous consent.
Ms. Wall, you had an objection.
Maybe a friendly amendment?
Yeah.
HRC, I think, was the committee that maybe was handling it, so.
I don't object to that.
So you change your
Yes.
motion. Are there any objections to moving this item back to the Human Resources Committee? Seeing no objections, that will be moved. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Moving on, I'm losing my voice, to item number 15. Madam Clerk. You have to do two jobs at once, don't you?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just trying to find my place again. We are on ordinance 2023-14, version B, Y. An ordinance transferring $540,340 from various capital improvement projects to CIP R 72-167 Dogwood Lane, CIP R 72-169 10th F and West 8th Streets reconstruction, and CIP U 76-127 collection system.
Madam Manager, thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This housekeeping ordinance would transfer $540,340 from multiple nearly complete or fully complete projects to newer projects to allow bidding and construction during the 2024 season. Due to significant continuing cost escalation, projects receiving funding no longer have sufficient budgets to complete the construction stage. This transfer will allocate additional funds to complete construction on these high-priority projects. Any ongoing projects will retain sufficient funds to cover remaining project work. Funding is provided by water funds and wastewater funds. The Public Works and Facilities Committee will review this request at the January 29th, 2024 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its February 6, 2024 meeting and moved it forward to the full assembly for action with the following comment. The SRC understands that the proposed ordinance reflects the CBJ's capital improvement plan prioritization process, and the SRC commits to reviewing the CIP broadly in an effort to find systemic racism as the committee is charged with. I recommend the assembly adopt this ordinance.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public that wish to comment on this ordinance? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the assembly. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I move ordinance 2023-14 BY and ask for unanimous consent.
I see no objections. That motion passes. Moving on to new business. Emma Halgedak, I apologize for skipping you, but we'll give you this one. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This is 2024 Assembly Goals Adoption.
Madam Manager.
The Assembly goals were discussed and decided upon at the December 2nd, 2023 Annual Assembly Retreat. The changes requested at the retreat were incorporated into a draft version that was considered at the January 29th, 2024 Assembly Committee of the Whole meeting. I recommend the Assembly adopt this final version of the 2024 Assembly goals.
Before we adopt, are there any discussions? Halgedak.
Yes, I move the 2024 Assembly goals and I ask for unanimous consent.
I see no objection.
Madam Deputy Mayor?
Mr. Palmer, Mr. Attorney.
Sorry to do this to you. Because this is an action item, can you see if there's any public comment on this one before we move on?
I'm very sorry. Thank you. Would any member of the public wish to comment on the 2024 Assembly goals adoption? Seeing none, thank you so much for reminding me. I saw no objection, so the Assembly goals are adopted. Madam Clerk, item number 17.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This is JG Construction Request to purchase city property near 6300 Jackie Street in the Lemon Creek area.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
In February, JG Construction applied to acquire fractions of 2 CBJ lots through a negotiated sale process, which have been available to purchase since 2017 by over-the-counter sale. The 2 lots are located on Jackie Street and were platted as part of the Renninger subdivision. The applicant has requested fractions of Lot 4 and Lot 5, which are the 2 remaining CBJ-owned lots. The applicant proposes to use the property for residential development, and the application states that if the sale is approved, then they will build a maximum of 28 apartments. JG Construction currently rents 18 units, 9 of which are rented to the United States Coast Guard, and JG Construction has rented to the United States Coast Guard for 24 years. On February 26th, the Lands, Housing, and Economic Development Committee reviewed this application and forwarded it to the full assembly with a motion of support to work with the original proposer. According to 5309206, the next step in processing the application is for the assembly to determine whether the proposal should be further considered and, if so, whether by direct negotiation with the original proposer or by competition after an invitation for further proposals. If the assembly provides a motion to negotiate with the original proposer on these two lots, and if the negotiations are successful, ordinances with terms and conditions of the sales will be introduced prior to public hearing. I recommend the assembly pass a motion of support to work with JG Construction as the original proposer in accordance with City Code 5309-260.
So are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this motion? Seeing none, bringing it back to the assembly, Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I move the Assembly adopts a motion, or the Assembly passes a motion of support to work with JG Construction as the original proposer in accordance with City Code 5309-260, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Are there any objections? I will object for purposes of a question. My question is to either Madam Manager, maybe Madam Manager or Mr. Attorney. The question is, will we, it seems like there's not been an opportunity for competition from somebody else that might have wanted these smaller lots. And I don't know if we'll hear from somebody about that. Madam Manager or Mr. Attorney, and then Mr. Bryson, and then Ms. Euskandis.
So these lots have been available to purchase by over-the-counter sale as listed in the land allocation plan since 2017. So this is the first interest that has been expressed in these lots.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I was just going to point out that this applicant was one of the people who were like, what are you guys doing here? When we started to really ramp up how we were going to help create more housing in the community. And I believe that the statement that I made at the time was, don't complain about what we're doing for other developers. Tell us what you need. I believe I had a specific conversation. I said, well, go to the lands if that's what you need. And so this has kind of come from the actions that we've been doing, trying to spur developers to build that multifamily housing that we're asking for. This is where we can help facilitate one, because we asked this guy to do it, and he's here saying, yeah, I'll do it.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson.
Thank you.
That's really great. Ms. Euskandis.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I was just going to further make that under out in lands that they'd been available and nobody was interested for many years.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Euskandis. Thank you, both of you, and I will remove my objection. Are there any objections? Seeing no objections, that passes. It's getting late, and I have a question for Mr. Attorney. I would like to do something new today. What I'd like to do, well, I guess first, are there any staff reports? Okay, thank you. Mr. Attorney, what I would like to do is mix and match committee and liaison reports and mayor's not here, and assembly comments and questions. And I'd like to do those together. The question is, should we touch on item 18 first? Because assembly comments and questions and committee and liaison reports and assembly reports are in, they surround item 18.
Sure, I could cover this real quick, less than a minute.
Okay, thank you. And is that all right with the assembly for us to do that? Okay, Mr. Attorney.
Yeah, thank you. So this is Hart versus Planning Commission and Huna Totem Corporation. This is a Planning Commission appeal that went to a hearing officer. The hearing officer's written decision is due to the parties soon, in the next week or so probably. And then the parties have a chance to review the decision, provide comment, and then it ultimately comes back to the assembly for consideration. I anticipate the assembly will have it on the April 1st agenda, and if something changes, we'll communicate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Attorney. So the assembly, what I'd like to do is for us to go in turn and just have our assembly reports, our committee and liaison reports, and comments and questions one by one, and we can make those as brief as we'd like, and we will start with Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Try to cover it all quickly. Finance Committee, you were all there at our last one, but we are meeting again on Wednesday. And we'll start off with a special joint airport board meeting, that's at 5:30. We'll hear from Juneau Community Foundation and the Juneau Arts and Humanities Council again as part of kind of our updated budget process where we hear from those partner organizations about what they're doing earlier in the process. And then we'll also get an update from staff on property assessments, which many of you may have seen in your mailboxes this week. Moving on to my liaisons. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Doing all of it?
All of it together.
Yep, okay.
Because I'm the acting mayor and I get to
Yes, thank
say
you.
so.
Chamber, at their last meeting, they talked about a lot about the school budget, and they provided us several letters that you probably saw about that topic. And Eagle Crest also met a few weeks ago, maybe almost a month ago now. I think they meet this week, continuing to be one of our unorthodox parts of the city. They are, and creative parts of the city. They are considering purchasing a sawmill to be able to take advantage of the timber that exists on the mountain while working on their many construction projects. They also, not to scoop the Planning Commission liaison, but recently their gondola and summer visitor plans were approved there. So they've been discussing that. Okay, moving on to my comments. I just wanted to, given that we've heard from our community in our inbox as well as the last two meetings asking for a ceasefire resolution. I, am reminded of former Assembly Member Gladishevsky when Russia invaded Ukraine, coming before the body and saying, if we can do something, let's do something. And I am, I personally believe that we need a ceasefire and that the Assembly has an opportunity to show that our community has influence when we use our voice to persuade our federal government to take actions that could change the course of this human rights tragedy. I know that I know that we rightfully often stay out, or almost always stay out of national and international affairs for good reason, but this is, to me, one of those times that we could do something. I've tested the waters with the few Assembly members that I'm allowed to talk to, and it seemed like there may not be an appetite for this. And so I wanted to, in a public space, say that if you feel differently, if you do want to explore a resolution, that during your comments, it would be helpful for me to hear that, because then I could move forward something. I'm not going to move forward on something that is not going to have some support amongst a number of Assembly members that would get us to a place to actually pass something. So thought I would use this public space to give you that opportunity when you make your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Wahalgedak, are you prepared? I'm sorry, I'm doing this out of order, but I'm shaking things up, so.
No, that's fine. The airport board met on February 8th. It was a really short meeting. I think we were like 15 minutes. Nothing of note to report on that. Their next meeting is March 14th, but we are going to see them on Wednesday. So I'll have the opportunity to sit with them. I missed the last Juneau Commission on Aging on the February 27th. And so our next meeting will be March 12th. And to Ms. Wall, thank you for bringing that forward. I definitely would consider something moving forward. I think there's definitely a lot of information that I don't know and would like to know more, but I definitely would consider something moving forward on the ceasefire.
Thank you, Wahalgedak. Mr. Bryson.
Oh, Madam Deputy Mayor, if I might, so sorry.
I'm
Quite a few of our folks from Juneau are heading off to Arctic Winter Games next week, including my son. So want to wish them all the best of luck as they're competing in an international gathering in Palmer and Wasilla, and hope that our Juneau folks do really well.
That's really great. Well, Hagadak, thank you for letting us know, and I'm so glad he's going up there with them. Mr. Bryson.
I'm Deputy Mayor. I'm going to see how fast I can do this. I made the opening remarks at Southeast Conference this year. I met with the Southeast Alaska Solid Waste Authority. I went to dinner with Senator Dan Sullivan. I talked to him about the Coast Guard icebreaker coming to Juneau and making sure that there were still plenty of opportunities for young families. I met with the Teal Street community group, talking about some of the homelessness situation problems that are in the valley. We had Public Works and Facilities. We passed some of that stuff tonight. Met with the Bartlett Board. I gave the keynote address to the BIPOC Business Expo 2 weekends ago. That was interesting. I went to the AWARE dinner, the Territorial Sportsman dinner, Juneau Animal Rescue, and today we had the UAS Campus Council. That's all.
And
Thank you.
Mr. Bryson, would you would you want to weigh in on Ms. Wall's question about the ceasefire resolution?
I approached this, and I thank Ms. Uskandis and Ms. Wall for bringing up that we kind of addressed an issue similar to this during the beginning of the Ukraine invasion. And we debated it, we had discussion, and we decided to say, no, we won't suspend relationships with our Russian sister city. Well, Russia came out and made that a propaganda piece, and they had a list of our names on the assembly. And so I would pause before I would be willing to put my name to something that the international war community would be interested in knowing my name. I was really disappointed when I saw my name on a Russian list, as they mentioned the Juneau Assembly. So yeah, I'd be really hesitant before we'd go very public on that.
Thank you for sharing that, and I apologize if I seem to be pressuring you.
And Madam Deputy Mayor, my intent is not to put people on the spot and make them feel like they have to speak, but if they do want this to move forward, it would be helpful for me to know that, so.
That's great, thank you, and Mr. Bryson, I apologize. Ms. Uskandis.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. The Lands Committee, you just saw one of our two items, the running jury land sale, and we moved forward with that. The other thing to know that's coming up, and I won't give you too many spoilers because it's a complex issue. In the last Lands meeting, we talked about the different options that staff could investigate. Mayflower Island is going to be returned to, I'm trying to think of the correct federal agency, BIA. So BIA, that is a process we haven't handled before, but much like the Assembly acquiring new land via Telephone Hill, this would be Mayflower Island in Douglas. And so there's a lot we still have to be finding out about that. And then the question of if we accept it, what to do with it, and we know Douglas Indian Association is interested. So that was sent to the cow with a motion, and no more spoilers. The Juneau Housing Homeless Coalition meeting was canceled due to some technical issues. SRRC, you saw their comment in the packet on the transfer. We had a really good conversation at that meeting. We had some new blood, which is always great because there was a lot of questions about the CIP process, and the group is excited to look at that process and continue their work on some of our other processes, which is what we want them doing. Travel Juneau hasn't set their next meeting date yet. It will be in the next 4 to 5 weeks. They are a very busy group, and they did just have their annual retreat and set their strategic plan. So it's trying to find a time that everyone can get together. I'll let you know what happens when we do get together. I think for my own comments, I would want to, we skipped assembly comments last assembly meeting, and it was much like this. We had a really long meeting with a lot of public testimony, and then by the time we get to comments, we're talking to empty chairs and probably a mostly empty Zoom. And we heard from this folks calling for a ceasefire resolution there as well. And for my own part, I would want to express in a public place as an assembly member to Juneau, that I appreciate those people coming and asking for that. And I appreciate people testifying about a ceasefire. I completely agree that we desperately need a ceasefire. I am contacting my federal representatives. I urge Juneau citizens who feel the same way that I do to please call your senators and call your representative, and I will continue to do that myself. And whenever I have the opportunity to talk with them one-on-one, I will bring that issue up. I talked to Ms. Wall today when she was feeling out some of the waters. In the Ukrainian resolution, it's one of those very hard things to know what to do. So I don't feel like, I definitely know that it's not the right space for us to be getting into, except I know that as a general rule, as an assembly, the more we can stay focused on nonpartisan local stuff, the better for all of us, because we probably start to diverge in how we feel about federal and international matters. And yet, it's really hard watching what's happening. It's a real genocide. And so that's kind of where I'm at, but I really do appreciate every person in Juneau who continues to put together rallies and protests, and I would just encourage people, make sure you're bothering your representatives. And I thank you for this thoughtful way of putting things together.
Thank you, Mrs. Gandes. Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you. Juneau Commission on Sustainability met on February 7th. There was a lot of talk about solid waste and how they're going to have some website pages with some information on solid waste forthcoming. Also talking about how, a lot of grants that they're trying to apply for are becoming very competitive these days, and so that we're less confident about our prospects for a lot of those. On February 9th, JEDC had their retreat, and I was really happy to hear when they were talking about their overall goals, they were a lot of members were very interested in getting involved in housing to a greater degree, and were really encouraged by what the Assembly has been doing in terms of housing, and seem to want to maybe get involved as well, which I found encouraging. And then Jackson Harbors met February 29th. A couple things. One is they are looking at potentially changing how they do vehicle disposal surcharges, which is a surcharge they charge to uninsured vessels in slips, not in transient moorage, because of increased costs. They're experiencing quite a loss when it comes to disposing vessels of owners who don't respond, especially with the ice storm we had recently and quite a few of them sinking and seeming unlikely that owners are going to take responsibility for them and very few of them being insured. So that's something they're maybe looking at increasing or changing in some ways. So that's just another rate thing that's coming down the line. And they also had some comments on Title 85, mainly questions about how things were worded and wanting some clarifications. That's something that I think the mayor and I are going to be working on with our tourism director and the city manager to bring forward at the April 1st assembly meeting when we're bringing that up again. So.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I wanted to use my first comment to welcome Ms. Hughes Gandes back into the chambers. It's good to see you on the mend, and glad that you can rejoin us. As a liaison to the School Board Finance Committee, they've been meeting sporadically and at different points. I've also been trying to stay abreast of the financial issues by attending regular meetings, including the last meeting where they were there from. They were there until nearly midnight. I was a little late because I was at the in the gallery at the Capitol watching the House pass the $680 BSA increase. But I did manage to attend more than half the meeting, despite being 4 hours late, which is a little scary. I did, Ms. Wall did do spoilers on my last Eagle Crest meeting, so thank you. Yeah, they did issue the CIP for the gondola and also reviewed that. At the Emergency Planning Committee, which was held on Valentine's Day, we had a nice spread of a nice little potluck there, and AELMP presented on the dam, the Salmon Creek Dam, and kind of emergency preparedness around that. I have been pretty busy this month. I'm pretty sure my supervisor has been missing me because I have been going to Southeast Conference and AML, and we just wrapped up with the Innovation Summit. I did see Mr. Bryson at both the AWARE event this last weekend and at the JAR event earlier in February. With regards to the question about the ceasefire proposal, I have had to sit down with these people. I do my office hours every Saturday, and they did attend one of those office hours and presented me with lots of information. Some things I was aware of, some things I wasn't, all of it very heartbreaking to hear. And they invited me to their rally, which was happening later that day, and I attended that to further educate myself on the matter. But it also, in another effort to educate myself on the matter, I also I feel really sensitive to how this might affect other members of our community. So I reached out to people in the community who, Jewish members, members of the Jewish community, to get their take on the situation. One person I reached out to called this a mess. Another and referred me to a historian who actually lives in Anchorage, a Jewish historian in Anchorage, and he kind of gave me some added perspective. I also I spoke to another person here in town and who suggested that any sort of action should not be just one-sided, that any sort of act, it should, well, if we call for anything, that we should call for peace, to an end to the war, to an end to the fighting, and of people dying. So I might be interested in working on something as long as we can be inclusive of everybody in our community, and address their concerns as well.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Bryson, did you want to say something before I give my report?
I failed to give the three names that needed to be appointed to the Building Code Board of Appeals, as I was the chair of HRC tonight, and I didn't. It's been a little while. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, that's right. Go for it.
All right. So just real quick, HRC recommended to the Building Code Board of Appeals Bradley Austin, Jeffrey Wilson, and Daryl Weatherall to term beginning immediately and ending August 31st, 2026, and I ask for unanimous consent.
I see no objection, so that passes. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm glad you remembered.
Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Mayor.
I'll try to make my report quick, and I was chair of the last meeting, and I said, let's skip this, so I decided we couldn't skip it this time. We've had so many committee of the whole meetings, I can't even count them. And we have another one next Monday. And you guys, when you refer things to the cow, I'm kind of shuddering because that's just like another agenda item. But we're going strong. I not only attended, but I gave opening remarks after Senator Keel at the Innovation Summit. And that was really quite fascinating. We did strategic thinking. We had some members of our staff that came in and out. Mayor Weldon was at that. And we went through a process in 4 hours that's normally done in months. And it was around future of Juneau, similar to what Mr. Holes gave us at the retreat, but around a future of Juneau. Some very bleak scenarios and some very positive scenarios. Anyway, it was really interesting, and they're going to continue to do that work with JEDC, and so we'll hear more about that. I have the PRAC tomorrow. I attended the last PRAC on the 6th of February. Lauren Varelli is the new deputy director, which is really great for Parks and Rec. They gave an update on the Treadwell Arena. On the 2nd of February, the city manager and I and Ms. Atkinson met with President Peterson. And on the 13th of February, I went with Director Koch to the streets department at their shift change, where she brought them breakfast, just thanking them for all the incredible work they've been doing on the streets, and it was really wonderful. Great group of people. I also attended Zentekahini, where kids testified on the school budget as if they were testifying, and so there were members of the school board, members of the assembly there, and they practiced their testimony on us, and it was also very good. I think that's all I have got right now. I think on the ceasefire resolution question, it's a question with many layers of anguish. And I agree that it's a terrible situation. I have feet, I think, in both camps, and I think it's very hard for us as an assembly to actually understand the issues fully. And I would probably prefer that we not move forward with that ceasefire resolution. I too was quite stung by what happened with the Ukraine issue. I mean, when the Russian media picked that issue up from our media, it indeed was propaganda, and the way they spun it was that Juneau supported the war in Ukraine because we had supported continuing that sister city relationship. So you just don't know, which is probably a good reason why we don't get involved in international issues. And that does not take away the incredible tragedy that's going there. I think a ceasefire does need to happen. I just am not sure we're the right body to try to weigh in on that. So that's where I'm at on that. But thank you, Ms. Wall, for bringing that forward, because it has been, we've had people here twice. I too have met with people, and I appreciate that. So that is all that I have. Are there any members of the public that would like to testify on non-agenda items? There's no more members of the public left. Madam Manager, I do not believe we have an executive session. So at 10:27, we are adjourned.